Hey, welcome, Dooovid here. Um, hope a few people saw me on JF's. People. Hopefully, some people will come on. I'll even be willing to put the link in the chat or send it to people who want to have a friendly conversation or ask me about. Certainly if they have what to add on consciousness or connection to the conference in Switzerland, and hopefully Church of Entropy will have a chance to join me, or some of others, or Brundlefly, if he wants, he's welcome to come on. And I want to go over some of what I did on my channel, some of my streams. So, if new people do come on, I'm going to screen share. After the debate I had with JF, I did a whole series of public study sessions. And in fact, the growth in my channel was largely related to my appearance on JF. I'd had a channel for years and a few hundred viewers and people watching like Hebrew prayers or local events in Detroit. And still I have a small viewership for the in real life stuff I do. And then, Luke Ford and the Brundlecast. But the biggest boost to my channel did in fact come from my appearance on JF. So I'm going to enter a screen share real quick and go over a little bit of the streams that I had done on my channel. Just make sure the sound is working. Okay. Culture Berry. Yeah, so the link to my conversation with JF is in the description. So I want to show my okay, let me just try to figure out to see if I get Church of Entropy on. If not, I'll see what your email, if I could add her manually. Sorry, streaming is difficult. That's what JF puts a lot of effort, to monologue, and the difficulty of creating a good stream is actually extremely difficult. So here is I call them public study sessions. So after my debate with JF on evolution, I had done a series of streams. The first one, I think, was in fact the very next day. It was July 4th. I wanted to give some of the positive evidence and what we talked about today, an overview of the history of the Western tradition of belief in God. And I downloaded PowerPoints. I searched the ideas, and mostly from university classes that had open available PowerPoints or different online personalities that had put PowerPoints online, because it was beyond my time ability to put in the work to create my own PowerPoints, although it could be in the future. So I apologize about the boomer tech. I'm trying to add Jennifer into the call. So I've sent her the link, so hopefully she should get it. Okay, so here is the overview of I appreciate Zed Des. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate you reaching out. And I just simply wanted JF to cover the consciousness conference, let alone to have me on. So even though obviously me and JF disagree about a lot of issues, he's got a great show and program. So to some extent, it's a great honor to be on his show. And he's more knowledgeable in these topics than me with his background in biology. But my background, more theology, philosophy. I'm an engineer and have a background in physics, but I did spend multiple years studying in Israel and rabbinic school, and obviously I have a huge library and spend constantly time reading on this subject. So this first video I did, it's 3.5 hours, and it's basically purely me monologuing. Some of these I have a small interlude with someone talking, and I go over the famous arguments for God's existence, St. Anselm's ontological argument, Thomas Aquinas, the teleological and cosmological argument, things like Occam's razor, Pascal's wager. And I found pretty good PowerPoints that present in nice, graphics, these arguments, and I hit them with different ones. And sometimes they're repetitive, but I have a time-stamped table of contents. So, like, if you wanted to see, jump straight to the cosmological argument, and you could see, different names and famous people and history of science, and what I was talking about, Descartes and dualism and Leibniz and monism. There's a whole bunch of interesting things, and hopefully I'll be able to return to these. And then I go into, Kuhn and the philosophy of science and Popper. And I have a whole series. So I did these basically one day after the next. And then so right after that, here's the full 4.5 hours. And I may have like a few interludes of guests. I go over Karl Popper and Thomas Kuhn. And actually I have, Karl Popper's book that I bought years ago and hadn't read, but I read that this last year. And we talk about verification and falsification, Thomas Kuhn's structural scientific revolutions, and the foundations of epistemology, how we know what we know. I cover David Hume, and then due to this is actually one of my better, most well received videos. I'm not sure why I'm having difficulty. So adding Jennifer. So let me try to go over a few more of these of what's on my channel. I'm going to try to get Jennifer on the channel. Hope I'm not going to have issues doing that. But let me just do a little bit of overview. So speed reading, I studied speed reading technique. Obviously, anyone sees my library. I have a huge library, and I'd taken, in junior high school already, Evelyn Wood's speed reading and then different courses. And so here I give an overview of what speed reading is. I found some nice PowerPoints, the different techniques of like chunking and hand motion. And this one's been very well received in real life. I've recommended this video to people. I've had multiple people tell me they've watched this video improve their speeding. And then I go to presentation of scientific papers where I look at the evidence, and I look at some of the papers that claim that so it's time stamped. I could just click on it and jumps right to it. So that there's a psychology of speed reading, going back to the 60s and 70s. And then there's papers claiming that speed reading is a hoax. And I look at the evidence that say that you can't speed read, and the comprehension goes down versus memorization techniques, that there's a maximum. And so this is a very interesting video and highly recommended. This is more like self-improvement, but it's related to consciousness and learning. And I go on and on. And then, I continue on and I start trying to say, like, what's the current state of science? And I'm looking into, the mind-body problems and the classical philosophy, like, who am I? And this is mostly the Western tradition. So looking at Descartes, Leibniz, Spinoza, Turing, philosophy of religion, I return to try to go in more detail, these teleological, cosmological, ontological arguments, the problem of evil, different concepts of the soul, what consciousness is, we'll call philosophies of minds, what is the hard problem of consciousness. And I actually find slides from some of the most famous people like Chalmers, David Chalmers, and Dennett. I have some of their books on my shelf, but I actually went and found some of their publicly available slides and went through them on my channel. And, so I go on, then I go like, some of these are basic, like even high school slides on, what is sense perception, how does the eye work, and some of them are, random, like the history of optics, to kind of show the long thing of history. So we have optics, going back to the ancient Greeks till the Romans, to modern history, to how people understood how the nature of light. And for people more interested in the basis of science, you might find better sources of it, but this was somewhat my own experience. I'd taken a lot of this. I was pre-med in university, and I go over linguistics, motivation, attention, the different aspects of consciousness that are called qualia, the different aspects of what are, in theory, our brain or our mind, so to say. If our mind doesn't reside in the brain, does, to form the internal you. So there's many different aspects of language and attention, and I cover as much of that as possible. So you see I'm on number 7, further state into the research of consciousness. And at some point I start getting into the most recent theories. Here I have David Chalmers, slides from David Chalmers, who's one of the most famous people, and then I go over his slides. These people you could look up on their own, and these are the type of people that are participating in the conference itself. And at some point I start looking at actual scientific papers. So we have cognitive neuroscience and motivation and learning. And this might be hard viewing. It's basically me reading through scientific papers. If it's beneficial, kind of like a book on tape, and you want to hear someone reading, these scientific papers, I'd be more than happy that people are gaining from what I did. But I did it possibly, mostly for my own self-learning. That's why they're called public study sessions. And I go on, so video 8, 9, 10, 10, I'm already looking at finishing the overview of consciousness and looking at the current theories, like the brain is a prediction machine, resonance theory. And this one here has like 2 hours of me straight reading this long article on the brain as a prediction machine through the history of hundreds of years of science. And it's pretty interesting. Someone who wants a more in-depth. I cover other things like utilitarianism, humanism, the Renaissance, a history of philosophy, because, to some extent, biology and science doesn't really give an accurate explanation, as JF was admitting to. The current state of scientific knowledge of consciousness is actually relatively limited. So I'm looking at the historical, different ways, utilitarianism and humanism, John Stuart Mill and Kierkegaard and Nietzsche and Sartre, so the philosophical basis of these questions. And, some of these are pretty interesting. I talked about resonance theory. I have slides on non-human animals, animal consciousness. And, so these are all timestamps. So, animal behavior and cognition. And so I found some slides talking about the current state of knowledge on animal consciousness. So hope people find it useful. There was a learning experience for me to do myself. Then I got more into religion, the religious, Hindu, Eastern religions, ancient religions, indigenous cultures on the soul, related topics. And this playlist will have all my public sessions. Adaptive resonance theory is one of the current best theories on the market, and quantitative mind. And this got hours of me reading a paper. And then I go into some like Wittgenstein, Heidegger, other stuff. Then I start doing other public study sessions, the development of Christianity. I have one on human rights and the civil rights movement, and Claire Khaw joins me, the lawyer from London. And, I cover like the history of the civil rights movement and law in America, and just different things, because I was getting good viewership. So I decided to do other things that were interesting. So I got one on day trading and equity markets. I worked in that field, and that was pretty well received. Forex Shark, saw that and recommends that video, and I might continue to do streams. I did some on Judaism, Jewish historical role in finance, and people interested in the JQ and the history of the Jewish involvement in banking. I found some really good slides from this book called The Lost Science of Money. And so there's nice graphics and slides that give as I talk through the kind of history, thousands of years of history of Jewish involvement in banking. And that, I debated JF on multiculturalism, and I went over all the evidence on what multiculturalism causes to society, the benefits multiculturalism leads to the economy and to business and to science and education. I also cover some of the negative aspects about the lack of social cohesion and trust. And it's an overview of the current state of, social science, but the science of social science of multiculturalism. And then this is, I meet Jennifer Scharf, Church of Entropy, and she informs me about the quantum mind. So I continue in consciousness and go over the Penrose Hameroff hypothesis and some like the mystical aspects of quantum mechanics. And there's some nice slides. So anyone who wants an overview of quantum consciousness, I'll even put this one in the chat. And that one's more directly related to the show. And then I have, so this is already this year. I did one on Israel military technology. And it's interesting. People, wonder about the power of Israel. And, current Israel has a very powerful military. And I have a in-depth, overview of the current state of Israeli military technology, and actually as an arms dealer, because Israel's in fact one of the largest arms dealers in the world. So I kind of give an overview what's within the Israeli military arsenal, the U.S.-Israel military relationship, and some slideshows and documents on that for people who want to know more about it. And then I was streaming regularly with Church of Entropy and the Blood Sports and Brundlefly. And, so I was talking about rhetoric and how to improve the content, rules of logic and persuasion, logos, pathos, ethos. And so I did a long slideshow on, the art of debate, rhetoric, communication theory. And this was, I debated JF on vegetarianism. So I did one on, the overview of evidence of, health, ecology, environment, ethics of vegetarianism, some nice slideshows like the effect of eating cows on the ecology, and then some different studies about what would the environment look like if everyone was vegetarian. I did another one. Unfortunately, this one had less than 100 views. My only one of these has less than 100 views on autonomous vehicles. I'm here in Detroit, and that's actually something I go to conferences all the time on and know a decent amount about. So I do kind of overview on the state of driverless cars, the phase in, what's the current state of technology, when are we going to see them hitting the road, economics, how much it's going to cost, how are we going to phase from the current state to driverless cars if they predict by like 2050 the majority or all cars might already be driverless, to where right now Tesla has driverless car on the market, but it's not legal. So anyone interested in that, this was for preparation for Brundlefly and his stream. I did usury, history of usury, the biblical aspect, Jewish views towards it, usury throughout history is a pretty good stream. So you got over 300 views. It's still pretty regularly viewed. And, this was somewhat like a preparation for when I talked on Brundlefly's channel with E. Michael Jones. And I did another one on UBI automation public study session. What is UBI, the history of it, its long history going back in Europe, the automation, why economic factors. This is a pretty good stream. Hopefully that topic will come more in time. So thank God. Okay, I got Church of Entropy. I want to get her on. And, so let me just finish going over my channel. So, I think I get 25 viewers. So thanks to all the people tuning in. And then I'll take it off screen share and start looking at the chat. So I also have an Ask the Rabbi series, people more interested in Judaism. And some of these I have people on. So I got Norvin and, the guys from Verbo Tempostus, Heel Turn, Brundlefly, Melchizedek had been on my channel. We're arguing about immigration, but I try to give an overview of like, what is a rabbi? What are the basics of Judaism? And the other one I give like, Jewish history, the laws of Lashon Hora. I do one on anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. That was, pretty interesting. People want, the Holocaust is a big issue, anti-Semitism. So it's a history, what happened during the war, what led up to it, or the history of expulsions and different things. I have another one, Zionism, anti-Zionism, and the transfer agreement. And I did one, Claire Khaw had a bunch of questions. So I did a stream answering your questions. I recently did this long one, is like almost 7 hours of just me monologuing. Brundlefly might have popped on a tiny amount. I don't even know if he did, on, the Jewish views towards intermarriage and half Jews, because I'm a half Jew from my father. What's a Jew, Israeli law, history, academic paper, Roman law, the history of European intermarriage law. So it's extremely interesting. I have another one in the works on conversion. It's probably also going to be like 5 hours of me talking, because I have, if you want to see all of these things on my tab right here, are articles in preparation for my stream on conversion to Judaism, which will be coming soon in the future. So and then I have my chat, and I hope to have more of these. I'm going to be trying to do more streaming and reaching out to more people. But I have I originally called esoteric Judaism, esoteric Doovidism, because people had been referring to me as that in their chats with people. And I have Melchizedek. Then he was going by Platonius P. I have open my post JF debate where I think Verbo Tempestus that came on, they saw me, Claire Khaw. I have my post Big Cat Kayla analytical chick. I don't know if people even remember analytical chick or Big Cat Kayla anymore. But analytical chick actually came on after she debated Big Cat Kayla, and then my post multiculturalism debate on JF. I did an open show. Veronica Kuzniar is actually my most popular show on my channel, and I met her from JF, and she's an interesting historian. She was actually a student of David Irving and has written a whole bunch of books. And in this, we talk about the lead up to World War II, mainly Kristallnacht and the transfer agreement. And that's widely viewed. It's my most popular viewed watched show. Faustian Spirit, if people are familiar with him, because I'm largely a libertarian like JF. And so he had reached out to me and wanted to talk about the non-aggression principle and things like immigration. And so that's also was a pretty popular video. Then Jennifer Scharf, Church of Entropy. Hopefully, I'm going to be able to figure it out to get her on right away after I go over the videos on my channel. That's becoming one of my more popular videos. And we've been streaming now for almost 3 months, a week in review. And we talked about her theories of a scientific proof of reincarnation and the quantum mind hypothesis. And anyone who saw me on JF, that's interested in her, check out her channel, check out that chat on my channel, and to find out more about her theories. And there'll be a lot more streaming. So, and then I have my personal in real life, like I'm involved with the Hare Krishna movement. I promote their activities in my area. Thank God now there's a whole bunch of temples. I'd also done a series on a few famous Hebrew books right after Luke Ford got me the microphone. I did Ethics of the Father, which is a compilation, the best of the wisdom of the Hebrew sages, and then Duties of the Heart, which is a deep theological book of, what's the obligation of man, and actually covers some of these positive arguments for God, like the cosmological argument, the first causes, and interesting things, and also Path of the Just, kind of like how do you become a righteous person. It's hard to be a righteous person in an unrighteous world. So how do you try to become righteous? And I even chant and sing in some of those. I originally created this channel to teach people Hebrew prayers. I have a lot of stuff, the downtown synagogue that I promoted. I have one on, Poles who saved Jews during the Holocaust, a presentation. I have transit stuff, urban planning, all different type stuff that, people contact me if they're more interested. But a lot of these things are chanting videos. If you're interested in learning Hebrew prayers, and also chess, I'm an avid chess player. So I have, different chess events and my chess coaching. So that's an overview of my channel. So I'm going to take it off of screen share, and hopefully anyone who is tuning in and never heard of me will now if you're interested in my channel, you could see that's what's on my channel. So thank God I got 30 people watching, and I don't know why I'm having problems adding Church of Entropy. It's an issue. I don't know if it's one of my settings and I'm trying to send her the Hangout link, and I got a very long Hangout link. I'm not sure if that shouldn't matter, but that'd be unfortunate if I can't get guests on. I might, I hope I don't get trolls, but historically, I'd even put the Hangout link. I'll do it. If I have to end the show or delete it, that'd be unfortunate. But I'll put the link in the chat if anyone wants to come on. So give me a second and let me try to see if I could get Jennifer on, because I'd done the preparation, the week in review on her channel now for many weeks, and we had talked quite a bit about what I was going to say on the show. So definitely I want her insight. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be working. So let me join my own channel and see if that works, and then I might just post it in the chat or try to answer. Okay, so I'm just going to put the link in the chat. And so if someone gets it and is capable of coming on, wants to talk about what we were talking about, that's fine. If unfortunately I can't get Jennifer on, we might have to, wait on to the week in review, or maybe she'll do a stream and talk about it. That'd be unfortunate if I can't get her on. So I'd been screen sharing, so I hadn't been looking at the chat. So I have my earpiece in, so if someone hops on, that's fine. And if there's new people who've never seen me before that want to add about consciousness, or I hadn't, because of censorship and trolling and worries about deplatforming, I haven't really done too many open streams on my channel. Like all my debates on the Brundlecast, and he deletes the videos or puts into unlisted because of the current state of censorship. And I'm very anti-censorship, but so unfortunately I haven't been able to do open streams. I'm thinking that I might try to do more streaming, reach out to people and have chats, and different people I'm interested in talking to, a lot about history or experts in different topics. And I have a vast array of different interests all over the place, so it might be interesting. Different people might find different aspects of my channel interesting and other parts uninteresting, because people might be interested in Judaism but not the science of consciousness or chess or whatever, and that's fine. And but as of now, I'm having it all under the same show. So see on my shelf, I got that Karl Popper on the logic of scientific discovery. Good book. I bought that when I was in university and hadn't read it. I have The Mind's Eye by Hofstadter and Dennett. David Dennett's one of the leading philosophical experts on consciousness. I think I have a few books. I have Philosophy of Mind. A lot of books that are, all types of books, but my earpiece is falling out. But this book I bought after the JF. This is more scientific theory on private speech, like what's the voice inside of our head. It might refer to as private speech. Different things. Dennett. I go through my library, and some of my streams usually before I start, I do book recommendations, and like Kevin Michael Grace. I think Luke is probably streaming right now, and so I don't know if there's any tech experts here that could walk me through why I might not be able to add Jennifer. And I'm not sure if this is I'm giving her the same link again, or if I have a setting issue. So I apologize. So I'm hoping I'm going to be able to get at least Jennifer on, and I'll be able to talk with her about. Okay, so I think this is it. So hopefully check your Facebook, Jennifer, and this should be the right link. So I apologize about that. Hopefully this will be the right link to get if anyone wants to join. So yeah, this should be the right link. So hopefully now, at least Jennifer or, friendly people who want to talk will be able to join the call. So hopefully okay. Are you here, Jennifer?
It worked, Dooovid.
Okay, great. What were your thoughts about the show? And I mean, I guess, I gave you the shout out, and I guess JF reached out to you, so hopefully you'll be able to message him. His schedule seems pretty clear for the next few weeks. Sometimes he's overbooked, but he looks extremely underbooked. So I would assume he'll be able to book you right away.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much for the shout out. I'm indebted to you for that. I really appreciate it. It was very helpful for me. I've been toying with the idea of going on JF for a while, and I guess on the balance, I wasn't really sure if it was for the better or worse, but in this context, I think it will actually be an interesting debate, because as we can see from your exchange today, I think you both made some really good points, but it was a bit of a challenge because you're coming at it from what I would argue are sort of disjoint perspectives. Because it seems like for you, you're starting with the religious vantage, and he seems to be a pretty staunch atheist. And as I've said it numerous times, if you can at least have a couple of axioms that you share from the get-go, it's hard to construct arguments that are coherent with each other. But I still think you both did really well. I think JF is defending a position that is antiquated. And if he wants to have these kinds of debates going forward, he should do what you do and really familiarize himself with the research, because the propensity for frauds in the domain of, quote, consciousness science is not a reason to discard the entire domain. It's just something you have to take on board when you're evaluating various sources of information.
Yeah, and I mean, that's why I hope we were able to find common agreement about quality, or people watching would be able to recognize through, JF and me saying, what does the science actually say? What is the current state of research? What are the postulations? And, kind of have a big picture of, from my stream, what do the ancients say? What do the different traditions say? What's the history of the scientific method and the understanding of ontology, epistemology, and different metaphysics to the current, most recent states of scientific research. And obviously, as they say, like, what we know, what we know we don't know, and what we don't know that we don't know. And generally, the assumption is that the biggest category is stuff that we don't even know what we don't know. So, JF at least seemed relatively willing to, agree on what's known and unknown, so that people that are interested in the topic and pushing forward could say, what are the areas that require further research, or people that are just, contemplating, like Pascal's wager, should I believe in God or should I believe in materialism, would know, current state of what the materialist perspective, what kind of answers that gives.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm not really sure where you want to take the discussion exactly, because I'm a bit biased, because I would have defended it in a bit of a different way. I think I told you I would have taken the actual positive on quantum mind, but I understand from where you're coming from, you don't feel like you have enough physics background to really defend that position. So I do appreciate that you are sort of deferring to me to defend that position. I think that'll be an exciting debate.
And that's not really where my heart was at. Like, I mean, he put that in the title, but my heart was more defending God and spirituality than quantum mind. And obviously you could believe in quantum mind and not believe in God and spirituality. Although I am leaning towards quantum mind, although, I don't know enough about it that, if Dooovid endorses quantum mind, whether that means anything. And actually, it was you that preferred those theories to me that I researched. And when I did that stream that I just mentioned on the Penrose-Hameroff hypothesis, that's actually, got almost 400 views, pretty well received. But I'm more interested in talking about what I have expertise. There's no reason for hundreds of people to listen to me talk about what I don't, something I don't know what I'm talking about on.
Sure. I think it's really hard to get a kind of grip on the philosophy of physics, because I don't think that that's something people really think about very often. They sort of just do physics. They don't actually ask themselves, what are the axioms of physics? But if I was going to be constructing a type of proof for quantum mind, I would start by going over the philosophy of physics, where it essentially divides phenomenological things into two categories. So there's classical and quantum mechanics. And within the purview of physics, there's really nothing else. So basically, it's either the mind has some sort of classical model to represent it, or it has a quantum model, or potentially some hybrid model. But really, those are the only options, because within the philosophy of physics, they do divide it in that dualistic way, basically either classical or quantum.
Yeah, so I'll be looking forward to, you and JF's talk on that. And, me and you, obviously, if we move forward with our weekend reviews, we'll be delving into that. And, my personal situation that might allow me to stream more often, I might continue with my public study sessions in trying to, really understand what's going on and go over a lot of the main theories within the neural explanations and the quantum mind explanations, and further, I haven't really even covered like the Kabbalistic understanding, and that's probably one of my greater areas of expertise. I have like hundreds of books on the subject and studied under some of the most famous Kabbalists to say, how does the Jewish explanation for how mind works. So I haven't even done any of that yet. And I'd mentioned like Freemasonry, Albert Pike, in different explanations that I would like to get into. They're more in my area of expertise, but I thought it was important for me to have a firm basis in science because, a lot of people, they don't care what the Kabbalah says. So I have to have a firm, like you said, you studied physics, not necessarily because you really wanted to understand physics, but because you wanted the platform and respect to be able to talk about topics like reincarnation, so people wouldn't just like laugh you out of the room when you say, "Oh, she knows physics." She could scientifically back up and justify what you're talking about.
That's true. I have become a physicist for utilitarian reasons, I guess. And that's why my, I guess, persona and optics and all that other stuff differ greatly from other physicists, perhaps. But nevertheless, we should judge arguments based on their truth or falsehood, not on necessarily who's delivering them. However, that does enter into the picture somewhat. So if you were interested in doing some type of exposition of the Kabbalistic teachings, I'm not sure how exactly you would go about that, because it's difficult to do it in the way that people have attempted to do it. They've tried to bridge the gap between religion and science many times, and what I find is that they don't do an exposition of their axioms, and they also use words that are not sufficiently well defined. Something like mind. You, having studied various Hindu mythologies, are surely familiar with the concept of this everything is mind idea.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of pointing out to JF, the concept, basically God is consciousness, and is a positive argument for God consciousness as God, and Kabbalah might point in that direction. It's very difficult because I could attempt to explain the Kabbalistic system, and I've met spiritual-minded people that aren't Jewish that could kind of understand, like, okay, that's a reasonable system to explain how the spiritual is manifested in the material. Versus like, if you're a religious Jew and you're interested in what the sages said about how the world operates, because you believe in the sages. So the different approach, that I'm not sure how I do that, or if it's even possible to do it, because the different views of presenting Kabbalah to a general public could be near impossible. And obviously, I studied Kabbalah in Jerusalem, under Hasidic Jews, and it was Yiddish, and it was in a uniform Orthodox society where everybody was in complete adherence with Jewish law, keeping Sabbath, praying 3 times a day, like tefillin, tzitzis, and all these different things. So, to try to explain Kabbalah to non-observant Jews or even to non-Jews would be all these axioms and explanations, where if you're in a advanced rabbinic school where you don't have to explain all these things, it's different than people who don't even know the ABCs of Judaism. And so Albert Pike and Freemasonry also draws on the Kabbalah, and there's different schools of Kabbalah, but that's something I'm interested in doing in the future of streaming. I assume even you as a non-Jew, or Claire, might have interest in that, and it might be a decent audience. So
of course, I'm definitely interested. I wouldn't, the reason I wouldn't want to go into something like Kabbalah myself is because I tend not to like review specific religious documents, because like either I have to do it for all the religions or none, and I don't really feel like it's beneficial. I don't think that the benefits outweigh the consequences of sort of giving a full-on explanation of all these various religious texts, nor do I think I'm necessarily qualified to do it. But just to come back to this all is mind thing, if you're going to axiomatically assert that, not you, but just theoretically, if someone were to do that, I'm just trying to illustrate like the issues with making these kind of connections. How do we define mind, right? And I'm not asking you that question expecting you to have an answer, because I have asked that question and I have failed to actually find, like, I cannot give an actual definition of mind. I'm familiar with these theories, but I don't use them because I can't define mind precisely enough to be able to impose it as an axiom.
Yeah, I was thinking when I finished up with my study of consciousness, I recognized my knowledge of physics and mathematics wasn't good enough to understand the top theories. And I've actually put quite a work. I took a course on linear algebra, a few courses on quantum mechanics, not like in a college course where I did like a whole bunch of homework problems and worked through problems, which I probably would actually have to do. But great courses, edX courses, reading books on the history of mathematics, and I realized that I had to up my mathematical understanding significantly to be able to intelligently discuss and understand these things. And I hope to do more of that. And okay, I'm a middle-aged man. I'm through maybe God forbid I say like a year of streaming, and the only thing that came out of it is my beard starting to turn white. But probably till I die, I'm going to be spending the majority of my free time trying to study and understand these issues, and taking advantage of the streaming, and hopefully be able to reach out to people who know about it and want to explain to it, and we'll reach a greater audience. And maybe this year when the Science of Consciousness conference posts all their videos on YouTube, I'll try to watch I'll probably watch all of them in 2x, and I'll read through quite a bit of the papers. And I might go University of Michigan Consciousness Center was participating. I'm alumni. My dad's alumni of the medical school where that's housed. And so I might go out there and try to speak to some of these people, or try to get them on a stream, or they might have conferences here near my house. So anyone who knows me knows like this is something that I'll be investigating as long as I have breath and energy, because it's something I'm passionate about, and I don't need to be making profit or getting viewers. It's just something that is fundamental to what drives me. But just for my YouTube streaming, there's a whole bunch of things that interest me, and I'd like to reach out to all types of people. Yeah, obviously Judaism's a huge interest. Hinduism, I'd like to have like gurus and different understandings of history of India, and theological Holocaust debates, and revisionism and World War II, and hopefully I'm going to be able to put myself together to make a bunch of interesting streams. And Claire, what do you think? Did you watch the debate or me on JF?
No, I'm afraid not, because I was busy on AutoStream promoting my ideas. So, and then the next thing I knew when that stream ended was that you were streaming. So I'm afraid I didn't see it. How did you think it went? And could you quickly sum up your arguments and his, and why you thought who won the argument and whatever?
I'm not sure if it was really kind of like a winning argument. Like it was, I mean, he put in the title like versus, and it wasn't so much of a debate. It was kind of an overview of the current state of knowledge and research, and the clash of epistemologies. So I don't know. I'll rewatch it. I think the chat was relatively friendly, and hopefully it was well received. And just the fact that I got 30 viewers right now is a good sign, because that's triple the number of viewers I usually get. And so I'm attributing that largely to probably people who are watching JF and decide to view. And I appreciate you guys coming to my channel, and it was really Zed Des in the chat too. I kind of reached out. I was like, why doesn't JF cover the Science of Consciousness conference? And then Zed Des was like, I guess JF had an open schedule, so he booked me, and the conference starts tomorrow. So it was kind of out of nowhere that I didn't have a lot of preparation to come on. I did Jennifer's stream last night, and she gave me a good prep going over, and then I spent a few hours today going over videos, reading through material. But I think it was pretty good. We both kind of expressed our way of looking at the world, and our different methodologies, and how that approaches to the study of consciousness. It
Do
was
you
actually
think you
pretty
could sort
friendly.
of say, give us a quick summary of what was said, if that's not too much to ask, about what you said and what he said, and I
I
think
was
that's
saying that
helpful.
consciousness doesn't. I mean, he's a materialist, so he's got the view that evolutionist, materialist, neo-Dawkinist or whatever, that believes that nihilist, that consciousness is just a product of material nature, and even that consciousness might be an illusion, doesn't even exist. It's just a fallacy that the replication mechanism, or kind of like I mean, he's not a Freudian, but like a Freudian, basically, the human body is designed to reproduce. So consciousness is just some sort of mechanism that evolution has created in order to allow us to reproduce or something like that. And so it's pure like biology and science.
Mhm.
And I obviously have a pretty spiritual approach where I don't think consciousness at all comes from the brain. I think it comes from a spiritual realm. And but we're both scientists, so I'm looking at the brain and mechanisms of physics, and saying that there is a spiritual realm, and the spiritual realm connects to the material realm. And I'm looking at the recent discoveries, because obviously you have the hard problem of consciousness. Science, no one has a clear understanding of how consciousness works. Religions and spiritual masters have give postulations for the mechanisms of the spiritual world. um, but in terms of like a scientific theory, there is no working theory. That's why it's called the hard problem of consciousness. And it's specifically like a hard problem because there's a lot of difficulties that people have postulated that may not be even possible to solve. So it was pretty good. We covered a lot of science and a lot of different theories out there, panpsychism, and the different approaches to the different issues. So I hope it was an educational stream that will encourage people to watch some of my videos, will encourage me to do more research. And I'll have to see. I'll read through the comments on the show.
Did
Certainly,
you mention ego and free will in any part of your discussions?
I don't think the actual term ego or free will came up.
Oh, okay. That's all I wanted to know, really.
I mean, it's related, and they say like free will from a scientific perspective. It's like free will is a philosophical question, but as a scientific question of whether we have free will or not, really, you need to solve the hard problem of consciousness to have a definitive answer. So, for a scientist, a biologist, to definitively tell you, and JF as a materialist might, be willing. Probably we don't have free will, and it's just an illusion that we think we have free will. But there's different understandings, kind of like half uh, understandings of free will. But that didn't come up. That's something interesting that I'd like to delve more into the future. And I think in terms like we mentioned in Blood Sports, he had about 500 viewers. Obviously, his main channel was demonetized, so he's streaming on a secondary channel that's not demonetized. So his viewership's like cut in half. So I think the viewership with me on was about the same as his regular shows. And I think he got more super chats with me on. So it was probably, he may not have even made $100. So historically when I was on, he even made like $200-300. So he may not have even made $100. But I think from the other shows, that in the last week, it might have actually been one of the more profitable shows. So in that sense, I think JF was happy that his audience, whether people like me or not, that he got a reasonable amount of donations and interaction. And, he seemed pretty, I've had good rapport with JF, even though we have serious disagreements and, may not want to live in the same town or each other running our societies. But in terms of streaming, I've always had positive relations. He's always said, thanks for having me on, and he's willing to have me back. And he seemed to take my recommendation, and hopefully, he's going to have Church of Entropy on. I didn't give you a shout out. I didn't mention it. I didn't think of it. Zed Dez is in the chat. He's one of JF's booking agents. So, it's possible that he'll be able to book you, but, I don't really have the authority or power to, reach out to JF and be like, yo, you want to put this person on your show? So you got, Zed Dez in the chat. So if you want to, you probably should go through him.
Yes, we were talking about it, but she was suggesting that probably not in my case, because they don't like secular Quranism or something else. But another question I wanted to ask you about the debate was, what do you mean by the hard problem of consciousness?
That's more a scientific term, that to say the general scientific consensus is that consciousness arises from the brain. I don't believe consciousness arises from the brain. And I mean, Jennifer might have like a half type view of, she's not as mystical or dualist as I am. And, hopefully when she's on JF, he'll be able to pick out a more clear, view of what Jennifer's understanding of it is. So if consciousness arises from the brain, how does it work? What's the mechanism? What's it's a biological mechanical system. How do you get from the neurons in our brain to what we consider consciousness? And there's certain reasons called a hard problem. One, because we don't have an answer to it. Science doesn't have a working model for how it works. And then there's certain difficulties that make it very difficult to even answer the question of what I said. I made the argument, consciousness is this unified vision where, there's a unified me, there's a unified Dooovid, Jennifer, Claire, that when, I'm talking to you, I don't feel like I'm talking to, countless particles or cells that are all operating in different directions that somehow produce vision. There seems to be like a unified you that listens to what I'm saying, thinks about what I'm saying, absorbs it, and replies. And science has a very difficult time trying to explain how you could have this unified projection of a singular person. And so that's what's referred to the hard problem of consciousness, what I think comes from David Chalmers, and I have his actual slides. You could YouTube him, and to try to understand the philosophy. But it's called the hard problem because it's meant to demonstrate.
It's not an easy problem.
Well, even
I looked
possibly
it up.
unsolvable problem even.
It says how and why sentience has qualia, and qualia are individual experiences of subjective consciousness. So why, I think you can establish the why it's pretty self-explanatory. The how, that's the big question, is how exactly do we go from non-living matter to living matter, and then from living matter to consciousness? That's the real trick of it. And in terms of establishing the better model, because like I said, you need an axiom axioms to be able to actually debate, I would say that this indivisible personality argument that Dooovid is alluding to, this idea that there's no meaningful way to subdivide your personality, therefore your personality is one single system and it can't be meaningfully subdivided, and this is the definition of a quantum system. So just definitionally, the consciousness meets the quantum definition much better than the classical.
But we're just individuals, aren't we? I mean, why?
You're basically saying you're saying a tautological statement. So you're not providing any information. You're saying we are individuals. Yeah, obviously we're not two humans grafted together. What's your point?
So I just don't understand these endless questions saying what is consciousness? Because
well, then find another stream and go yammer on about clitorectomies, because that's what we're talking about right now, and we both care about it.
Well, I care about it, and I'm curious about why people are talking about it, and why there's a divide between atheists and believers in their perception of consciousness.
That question would take a very long time to answer.
They said, I mean, you could watch the stream. I have about 50 hours on my channel of streaming on it. So, huge library behind me.
Well, we just want you to say it in a sentence.
It's impossible. Anyway. I already did, but I'm saying now I'm saying quantum physics. To understand the quantum mind, you have to understand quantum physics. You have to understand advanced biology, anatomy, so many different subjects that it's just impossible to give a quick, concise explanation. I mean, I gave a quick overview.
So it's not a philosophical question then, or what? It's a biological question.
Well, I think you have to. I mean, if you don't want to watch my streams, I made hours and hours of streams. There's a lot of literature and YouTube videos on the subject, but I'm not going to be able to, spend. I don't want to spend the stream now, doing consciousness 101.
No, I just really wanted a kind of, quick one sentence.
Yes, I can't do that. I can't do it.
I can just give a really quick one sentence answer from a very sort of low level. People care about what happens. They care about the ultimate origin and they care about the final destination. And that takes different forms, religion and science being the main ones. So that's basically how I would sum it up.
And I'd mentioned, Deepak Chopra's debate against what's the JF's atheist teacher, the selfish gene. I keep forgetting his name, but JF's like main Dawkins. I mean, he's British, I think. So he had debated Deepak Chopra on atheism, and he took a different approach than what we were talking about last night, which is a more Hindu approach, that is kind of consciousness is God, and that that there is, people intuit that there is a unified personality. That when you say Claire, you're saying, well, I don't know why I do what I do. I just do what I do because of a whole bunch of sense perception and biological impulses. So if you take a nihilist view like JF, you just accept that there is no unified you, and it's just a whole bunch of desires and sense perceptions in different qualia that come together to impact who you are, as opposed to your perception that there's some sort of unified you, what you might think of a soul that survives death. But even if you're not talking about a soul that survives death, and you're referring to what is this unified me that I feel controls my body, and you refer to that as consciousness. So the hard problem of consciousness refers to the hard problem of biology trying to explain what that is. So if you're a believer in the soul, it's still a hard problem to, well, how does the soul and the material realm interact? So you have Kabbalah, these whole complicated systems of the interaction of the spiritual and material realm. I mentioned, Descartes and the ancients and the pineal gland, and possibly, these new theories of the microtubules and quantum entanglement.
I could define the soul. I think I could define the soul in a kind of general, universal way, and say that the soul is the memory we leave behind after we are dead, because we don't talk about souls except as of dead people.
That's a stupid definition. Very stupid definition.
Why?
Well, I don't know. I mean, called stupid, but I think it's elementary. So if you haven't studied the deep theology behind the soul. But it's my point, just consciousness, everybody has it. So they have intuitive views, like, say like you have a body. So when you see the doctor, you might not be a doctor, but when the doctor explains what's wrong with someone's body or what they're going to do to try to fix your body, you can intuitively have some understanding what the doctor is saying, because he's talking about, the body that you have. So the same thing with consciousness, even if you haven't in-depth studied it, you have consciousness and therefore intuitive understanding. So if you understand, you feel I have a soul, even if you haven't studied theology or read the sages or put much thought into, what's the nature of the soul, how does it work, how does it operate, you still have an intuitive, well, I have a soul, like I expect to survive death. What's the I? So typically, like the Hare Krishna stuff, I have my temple, or even some, more traditional religious Judaism, saying the I isn't my, this flesh and bones. The I is the soul, and that soul will survive death. But if you want an exact working model in a scientific way, so well, how does your soul work? How does your soul communicate with your body? Those are extremely difficult questions to answer.
Well, it's the quantum mind, right? And the problem with defining your soul as the memory you leave behind implies the soul has no connection to your actual body, which is a bit ridiculous. The soul and consciousness, by your definition, Dooovid, would be the same thing. That's why I don't use words like soul, because they have a religious connotation. I just say quantum consciousness. And if you want to call that a soul, be my guest. It's an aesthetic preference.
Well, couldn't we
No.
think of the soul as the SIM card and the body as the phone?
Well, that's the historic model of the chariot driver and the chariot, that the soul is the chariot driver and the body, is the chariot and the horses, or the, the different model. And, I mean, that's the classical understanding that it's a little 3-year-old kid, you could teach, you have a soul and you have the body, and the soul is the controller. And if you're more materialist, you say you have thought and the thought can control the body, but the thought is not separate from the body. The thought is a faculty within the body that controls the body. So it means you're saying, Claire, your intuition is that the controller of your body is something spiritual, and you would have, what you call the soul might be translatable to consciousness. That you're saying consciousness is the controller of your body, and you refer to that as the soul because you have a spiritual approach, and you believe that it's something within the spiritual realm that is you and controls the body, and that will survive death and go to heaven or hell or be reincarnated, as opposed to someone else who could understand there is an I that controls the body, but that's just a bunch of processes of blood and electrical signals arising from the brain.
But obviously our soul is our experience, our memory, our feelings, our opinions, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's all stored in the quantum mind. That's the whole point, is that the body doesn't store this information, the mind does.
Well, so if these questions really bothered you, I mean, assuming you're a middle-aged woman or whatever your experience in life, saying if these questions had really bothered you, presumably you would have researched them. And a lot of times people, it's not until death is approaching that they start to worry about them. Like as a rabbi, I'm not formally a rabbi, but someone who had went to rabbinic school and is involved in theology. Your average person doesn't really concern themselves with these issues usually till death approach, and it'll usually start with the death of their parents or grandparents. Maybe someone's in their 20s or 30s or earlier, and their grandparents pass away, and they're worried, like, what happened to my grandparents, and then their parents, and then as death of themselves approaches. But it's not a simple answer. You're not going to come to the answers from just talking to me and Jennifer on this stream. And it's something me in my youth I found a very interesting topic. I went to Israel to study under the greatest sages of my tradition, and I went to university and studied under great scientists of the tradition, and I read books and I'm streaming, and it's extremely interesting that I've dedicated a substantial energy, thousands of hours of my life, maybe even tens of thousands of hours of my life, to understanding the answers to these questions. So if it's something that doesn't bother you, you're probably not going to do the effort to look into it. And you could say it's something like health. You say, okay, you have a body, and most people would agree that it's it's better to have a healthy body, but how much time do you actually invest into having a healthy body? And either through exercise or study of anatomy, medicine, seeing doctors, getting advice from experts, so on and so on. And so it's similar with the soul. And so if those questions really bother you, that you want answers to it.
Not so much the actual question themselves, but why it seems that people are wasting so much time talking about something that's obvious. Like, well, what is consciousness? The fact that we are conscious of ourselves and that we are different from other individuals. That's it. Why spend endless hours talking about it?
Because it's not so obvious. And saying there's countless issues. I'm saying if you're talking about, okay, you naturally intuit that you have a soul and your soul will survive death. And, the questions of, well, what happens? Do you go to heaven and hell? Do you get reincarnated? Is there divine punishment? There's different issues that we debate. Atheism of if there is no God, if there is no moral agency, saying me and Jennifer strongly believe in karma, and saying it's a fact of the universe, of some sort of scientific spiritual laws, that you can't sin and get away with it. You might be able to temporarily sin, just like you could, so to say, break gravity. I could throw
but
something
you turn
up.
it into a moral question.
Well, I was saying it's a relatively simple question that, like, yes, a little kid could think about and give answers to these questions, but they're extremely complicated, and no, it's not so simple. And in reality is these questions still largely remain unanswered. And even the greatest minds, the greatest sages of every generation dedicated, usually, that's the definition usually of the religious sages of the different traditions, was the fact that they dedicated themselves to answering these questions.
I'm asking the wrong question, Dooovid. That's what I'm trying to say. It's like the question shouldn't be what is consciousness, but what creates consciousness. That is the thing, isn't it? So why don't you just
Right.
ask the question?
Right, but
There's
if
a whole
I
bunch of questions. I'm saying that that's a good question. There's a whole bunch of questions, and saying so. I mean, I didn't really want to create this stream to do like a, just like a. I mean, if you really have serious questions about this, like, I encourage you to look more into it in different venues, and I have a whole bunch of streams on it. But I'm not really. I mean, we could go over it, but that's not really my interest right now.
Okay,
I'd be more interested in bringing new people on the show or hearing different opinions.
Dooovid, I let Gandalf know, so I think he's going to join. He's really excited to join. He missed the debate, sadly, because he was out, but I know he's interested. And yeah, the question of the origin of the mind, you're probably right, Dooovid. It's maybe, I don't want to say it's unanswerable, but it depends on the definition. What do you mean by mind? And yeah, like you said, it's probably outside the scope of what we're talking about right now.
Well, I think also I said that usually in terms of the religious or sages, the reason why they're sages is because they dedicated themselves to these questions that your average person doesn't put much thought to, or someone like Claire was like, well, it's obvious, like I don't need to think about it, when in reality, like, it's not obvious at all. And factually, like I sang that song yesterday, Lo Yikikavar Shinin Alfin, Alaya Gavirtek Vikashmai, even if you live thousands of years, you would only be able to scratch the surface of these topics. God's wisdom is great. The wisdom of the world is almost impenetrable. So it's not, you might think that it's a simple question that has a simple answer, but the fact is you could live thousands of lifetimes. You could have institutes of thousands, tens of millions of people studying these issues, and you would only be able to scratch the surface on it. And usually the venerable sages of Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Catholicism, there's like Saint Anselm. You've heard his name, right? Claire, Jennifer, you both, when I say Saint Anselm, you know who I'm talking about, right?
No,
Yes,
sorry.
yes, he was a bishop, wasn't he? Sorry. I forget, but the philosophical question.
But I'd say like Muhammad and these different names. The reason why they're known 1,000 years later is because they chose to dedicate themselves to these very difficult questions that most people don't think about. So I mean, I'd say, just because you think about these doesn't, Doovid's not necessarily a sage just because I like thinking about these topics. So, obviously some people came up with better answers than others. But, generally the religious sages are the ones that try to give answers to these very difficult questions. And, when we're looking for answers to these questions, so he's like, Claire, maybe you thought it was, it's just simple. It's obvious, it's not worth time to think about. And then all of a sudden, God forbid, when you're on your deathbed and you're thinking like, oh, it was simple. Like I'm certain I'm going to heaven or something. But usually, it's death that causes people to think about these things if they think about it at all. But the reality is they're extremely complicated. And from a religious perspective, it's the most important question that exists. And usually when people go to religious leaders or cult leaders who do life cycle ceremonies like, birthing of childs, marriages, coming of age ceremonies, deaths, funerals, it's because they have knowledge of these esoteric questions. Why you turn to them why do you turn to the person who is going to perform your marriage or is going to name your child or is going to perform your funeral? It's because they have greater knowledge about these deeper questions that most people never thought about.
Okay. I mean, the problem seems to me that it's just framed in the wrong way, because what was we thought was a sort of definitional question was really a religious question. So that explains why people talk about it so much. It's not really about the mechanics of what creates consciousness, but who created consciousness.
Even if you say it's God, there's a Kabbalistic system. So just because I'm a believing Jew and believe in, Torah and Moses and the prophets and Revelation and the sages, still the sages, like I put my books in the background, more my science and theological books than my Hebrew books, but I have hundreds of books in the background, in my library of sages and how they try to explain from a Jewish perspective the answers to these questions. And no, they're not simple. What happens? What's the origins of the soul? How does the soul interact with the body? What's the effect of sin? how does karma, action, reaction, reward, and punishment? These things are extremely complicated questions that
Theoretically, they're very simple, aren't they, Dooovid? Because I mean, the whole idea of the creation of the concept of the soul is that, after we're dead, we have to be punished or rewarded in the afterlife. And when you have this soul, which could be anywhere, and go to heaven or hell, you have this entity that represents, our lives, to be punished or rewarded.
the fundamental question is simple, saying like, yeah, if you're a believer and you believe that, from a Judeo-Christian Islamic perspective, that there's God is the judge, and when we die, all of our good deeds and bad deeds are judged, and we're either passed into heaven or hell, or reincarnated into our next life based on an accumulated judgment of all the good and bad deeds that we've done over our lifetime. That's relatively simple, and you could explain it to a tiny child. But obviously, like as a lawyer, just like the law, the concept of law is pretty simple. You need law and order, you need rules for a functioning society, but obviously law is complicated, and there's tiny minutia, and there's lots of contradictions and different conflicting interests. So mechanics of what makes a good person, people are mixed baggage. They have a series of good and bad deeds. How is that judged? What's the effect of righteousness or sin on the soul? Are actually extremely complicated issues that are near impossible to answer, even though the fundamental tenet is simple enough to explain to a young child.
To be good people if they have religious principles, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you're just saying like Hillel. You're saying the golden rule, like saying like, well, I know the golden rule. That's it. Like be a good person, love your neighbor as yourself. Hillel said, "Don't do unto others that what you don't want to do unto yourself," and that's it. I got it. But like obviously that's not the case. Like you could say like that pithy sums it up. The golden rule: don't do unto others that what you don't want done upon yourself. And Hillel adds to that, now go learn, or love your neighbor as yourself. That you could say, that's simple. You tell your young child that, and that sums it up, and basically everything's contained within. But obviously, like if you just told your young child, love your neighbor as yourself, that's not going to be able to help them make every single decision that they need going forth in life. There's a lot more complicated than that, even though you could agree that, yes, in a simple manner, that is the answer to your question.
Mm-hmm. So the next question to ask is, once you agree that if you have religious principles, you're more likely to be a good person, then the next question is which religion should you choose? And and the one for your country, then, and if you choose correctly, then you will be better.
Obviously, these things are very complicated because there's different religions and there's different systems. What's sin? It's like is how serious of what's sin and what's righteousness isn't.
It's whatever God forbids.
Yeah, but there's different systems of either prophets that said contradictory statements, or religions, or religious texts, or even within one prophet himself, like even just within like the Quran or Moses, there would appear to be multiple internal contradictions just with what in one single master said. So if you're just like, okay, I got it, your secular Quranism, we'll use the Quran as your legal basis or whatever, that's still not going to be enough, because there's a lot of internal contradictions where it says,
but we'll get there when we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
You're going to get to it instantly. Like on day one, you're going to get to it, because there's so many. So the Quran or Moses Torah has or the Vedas have a whole bunch of laws. How to wake up in the morning, how to use the restroom, what to eat, how to interact with other people. But like on day one, you're going to come into things where it's hard to say, well, it says here, this is how you're supposed to live. And it says here, something that would appear to point in a different direction. What do I do? And generally that's what like rabbis or gurus or cult leaders are for, is to guide you in that action. But it's saying what makes the guidance of your local imam or rabbi or guru, that they're going to be able to guide you through it. And it's because they've dedicated themselves to the study of these complicated issues.
I agree. But what I'm saying is that, first you have to choose a religion, and on what basis do we choose a religion if we're not just going to accept that the one that our parents gave us, just because we are their child? So, maybe there's a logical way of working out which one it is. And I say, well, Jews are, the kind of gold standard of religion in the sense that they've had the
I don't
oldest
want this
one.
stream to turn into a Babs cast. So like, I want to have it more structured, and I didn't want to bring you on just to like pound me with question after question, or just a forum for you to give your opinions. And I know we got JMR in the chat saying this is boring, and the fact is, yes, this is boring. Most people have no interest in this stuff. And when I did two of the streams on my channel, one on Duties of the Heart and Path of the Just. Path of the Just says the greatest minds will dedicate himself to different things. Very few great minds will dedicate themselves to spirituality. And the presumption is generally that spirituality is that people are dedicated to spirituality are generally, dull-minded or unintelligent. But factually, this is the most important of any of the sciences. And the people with the greatest minds, the greatest service they could do is to dedicate it to the study of God consciousness. I don't really want to debate this or come back to like saying that's the path I've chosen, and I'm looking for people to join me on the path and like Duties of the Heart said that this what is are you a troll or what is are you?
No, I'm not a troll. I just had a couple questions.
Okay.
I was wondering, was there a time you didn't believe in God, or have you always?
I had minor amounts of atheism as a kid, and I went to a secular school, and so in high school I was kind of atheistic. So I was bar mitzvahed in a secular Jewish background, but I always kind of talked to God, even though I didn't have a formal prayer or training. And after high school, I went to Israel and became a religious fundamentalist. So maybe I had brief periods of atheism in my teenage year, and thank God I was relatively free from sin because like I had a bar mitzvah and decent training, even at my coming of age ceremony at 13. And by the time I was 18, I went to Israel and became a fundamentalist. And I would say since I went to Israel at 18, over 20 years now, I have occasional doubts, but basically I found God when I went to Israel, and I haven't seriously questioned God once in my whole adult life.
Damn, that's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Did you come to my show from watching JF?
Yeah, I was over at JF's show, and I like that was a very good debate.
Do you have nihilist or atheist leanings?
I don't know. I was actually going through your YouTube page, and I seen you were into ISKCON and stuff. Or I don't know if you attend.
Yeah, I'm in Metro Detroit, and I'm active at least in my area. If you know ISKCON, I probably have, even people on my YouTube channel that travel the world, like Radhanath Swami, Gopal Krishna Goswami, Mother Malati, Ramapada.
That Radhanath Swami, he's really cool. I first heard him on Duncan Trussell's podcast.
No.
He's kind of like a hippie, and he had him on a show, and like that's when I first heard about Krishna, and like Krishna eating mud and his mama going up there to stop him to pull the mud out of his mouth, and the whole universe was inside of his mouth. I'm like, this is so awesome. It's like,
I mean, so where I mean, you don't have to give that much personal information, but so you saw me on JF and decided to come over because what I said was interesting. You're saying you had kind of you've had some spiritual experiences or thoughts about God, but haven't formally made decisions of whether you're a believer or want to dedicate yourself to God. But kind of mix of the road. Do you have a soul? Is there a God? Is there a purpose to life? Or is it something that like Claire or something where you haven't really looked at it as it's a serious question that requires serious research and serious answers and a dedication of your time and effort to look into?
well, like I listen to a lot of podcasts at my job, and I'm pretty big into like listening to religious stuff. I've been listening to some Muslims. I wish I could remember his name. It's like Omar Suleiman, and it was one on the angel Gabriel.
Is
And, what's that?
Islamic understanding.
Yeah, Jibril, and the descriptions of him are just like insane, like green wings that are like 700 miles apart that shower out pearls and emeralds. I'm like, this ain't nothing. Like I went to Sunday school. I never heard of this stuff.
Have you heard that? I mean, Claire's the Muslim on the panel. I'm not sure. Have you heard? You know what he's
I
talking
heard
about?
like secular Quranism. Like I've never heard of this before. What's going on with that?
It was kind of like secular Judaism, but
Please.
Like
I'm not
cultural.
Muslim.
if you heard of what he's talking about with Jibril and the emeralds,
I don't understand. What was this about pearls and emeralds?
Like the Muslim descriptions of the angel Gabriel, and his wingspan is like 700 miles, and he has pearls and emeralds that shower down from his wings.
I don't really believe. I'm not interested in the stories. I'm only interested in the rules. Okay, that's the whole point. That's the difference between secular Quranism and Islam. All right, I don't believe in any of the stories, or I take a neutral position, and I'm only interested in using the rules of a religion in order to fix the problems of the West. I hope that's clear.
Okay, yeah, but why not just make up your own rules instead of using the Quran?
Because people will say, "Who are you to tell us what to do, Claire?"
you could join her channel. What if is saying Claire's got her own channel and she streams regularly, so I'm sure she'll be more than happy to answer your questions on her own stream.
I could see where it's going.
But I want to keep
You
this.
have to believe
I want
in
to
God
keep
to
this
have
show
morality.
directed. So I'm saying Claire's got her own channel. You could
Okay.
follow her channel. Just
I
click
actually
on her
just
name in the
subscribed to
chat, and follow it, and you could ask her questions on her show. So is that it? Did you have anything else you want to say?
Oh, have you seen Darren Aronofsky's Noah?
No, I never heard of them. I'm not so much into popular culture or movies.
Okay, it's pretty cool. I guess that Darren Aronofsky's taken a lot of like Kabbalistic elements, like weird, like what is that? There's like this gold element in it. They call it Zohar. Does that have any significance in Judaism?
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of channels. I do Ask the Rabbi streams. I mean, Zohar is one of the fundamental texts of Kabbalah. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, I talked about that on different channels, but I don't know why I have the time right now to just answer a whole bunch of, like Judaism 101. I
Okay, I
try
don't
to
want to bother you or nothing, man.
like Ask the Rabbi. I'm trying to keep this related to the consciousness and the deeper questions. Like there should be a venue for, if you're interested in the basics of Judaism, and I have streams on my channel, but I want to, try to get more people to talk, and I don't know if people are going to be interested in just me answering a whole bunch of random questions on Judaism.
All right, man. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Thanks for tuning in.
Yes, sir.
What about you, Jennifer? Have you always believed in God, or did you have? I mean, obviously you had questions of your Catholic upbringing, but did you ever have a period of atheism, or would you always have a spiritual bent and understanding?
I've always believed in God. I just didn't, believe in the Christian God. Obviously, it's not a credible God. But what can you do?
Well, I mean, it causes you to research. So I would say, okay, if you just follow the path of your parents or the system that you were brought up in, as opposed to having to actively try to find answers to the question yourself. So you're saying that's, if you were shaken from your ancestral traditions, but you weren't shaken from God, like we mentioned on your show last night, that on proving God, there's usually a two-pronged process where first you want to demonstrate that there is a God, a primal creator that controls and is active in the world, and then you want to show that God is in fact the God of your tradition. So if you were saying you were only shaken on the second half, that the God, or Jesus Christ or Catholicism, what was questions to you, but you didn't question the fundamental tenet of there being a God.
Yeah, that's correct. I've always been deeply religious. My faith is unshakable.
And I don't know if Claire is.
I have wavered over my life about the existence of God. I think when I was a child, I hoped he existed, and then as a teenager, I decided he didn't. And as I get older, I see the utility of believing in God, and I suppose because of that, I move closer to belief these days. Is that an acceptable answer?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, your secular Judaism is generally where people disregard the rules and take more of the spirit, saying like social justice or repair the world, but they disregard the rules, as opposed to your secular Quranism where you're disregarding maybe the spirit and trying to keep the rules. So it's it's interesting. I mean, the terminology doesn't necessarily mean that one is correct or even what it means to be correct. But it's interesting, the dichotomy between what would be called secular Judaism, where people disregard the rules and try to keep a little bit of the spirit of it, as where you're disregarding the spirit and trying to keep the rules.
Just because I say I disregard the spirit and the stories doesn't mean that other people would do the same. I just create a framework in which people who have different beliefs would, be able to live their lives in peace and hopefully interact with each other in a regulated, civil way, and allow there to be, and that women and minorities are treated reasonably fairly. And that's really what I'm trying to achieve. I'm not saying everybody convert to Islam, but obviously I'm saying that certain rules need to be there for there to be a civilized society, and the most important of that would be the rule that most parents will be parents of legitimate children, so that the next generation will not suffer this generation gap, because what it seems to me is that there is mutual incomprehension between the generations in the West, because things have changed so much, not even within a generation, but within just 10 years, because there are all these terms like, millennials and generation X, Y, Z, and, all that sort of thing. So this suggests to me that that they won't be able to cooperate with each other.
Yeah, I mean, you've said your philosophy many times. I mean, you said you don't need to repeat your philosophy, but I mean, it's interesting to think secular Christianity or Catholicism might revert to basically tolerance and respect, where a person who loses their Christian tradition and becomes, so to say, a secular Catholic or a secular Christian will keep these principles of tolerance and respect as their guiding principles, as where a secular Jew will keep principles of repair the world and social justice, and maybe a secular Quranist will keep principles like you're saying. In a secular,
I'm saying they can all live within secular Quran.
A secular Hindu, you might have other spiritual principles that there's still, well, I'm still spiritual. I still believe in a unity of in karma. That it's interesting, the dynamic of kind of like a secularized religious person and what the fundamental principles they take with them. And I've been over the Pew survey, and there's probably general polling data that would point to trends of what different Jews, Muslims, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, when they become secularized, the overarching principles that they take with them.
Well, what they tend to do is they think gay marriage is okay, even though it goes against the fundamentals.
Because it's tolerance. I'm saying a secular Christian, when they give up on the religion and say, okay, the rules, they'll say, like as a Jew might repair the world and social justice, a Christian will take the principle of tolerance. So you take it down to gay marriage, but that's just one derivative of the principle of tolerance. So like a secular Christian, saying like their religion is tolerance.
Well, because it's stupid, because it just means, we're all liberal and we tolerate gay marriage and we push it.
Well, I wasn't asking for your opinion on the issue. I mean, you're welcome to have your own opinion, and like obviously you got your own channel, and you've done countless
I
streams
thought
on it.
you were asking me a question, and I'm trying to
Well,
answer.
I'm more meta-analysis. Like I'm not asking for like your opinions on. I mean, I guess your mind works in a different way because.
No, I'm actually challenging the definition of a secular Christian because it makes no sense at all. What you might mean when you say secular Christian is a cultural Christian. So a cultural Christian doesn't believe that Jesus is the co-equal of God. He just goes to church at funerals and weddings and
Well, I think a secular Christian believes in the fundamental principle of tolerance.
Because he's just been liberalized. He accepts the
Well, there's
pervasive
different reasons. I mean, if you want an
liberal.
explanation for what it is about Christianity, that why a Christian, when they become secularized, would sum up their religion under the principle of tolerance, there's different explanations, and it's probably attributable to Jesus Christ and the different teachings why a secular Christian,
Did he
their
say
religion.
tolerate everything and be gay? I don't think so.
Well, I was saying a secular Christ, you're saying it's a secular Muslim, it's unlikely that their religion would be tolerance because when you become secularized as a Muslim, tolerance would unlikely be what would sum up the person, as opposed to a Christian. The nature of the religion of Christianity, you might make it to be that tolerance becomes the religion, just like a Jew. Tolerance might be a principle, but not really. Like a Jew would become secularized, because like the chosen people or different things. Secular Jew, their religion isn't going to be tolerance. Their religion is going to be like repair the world or social justice. I mean, there's different factors of the religion that make the fundamental principle of the secularized, and just the fact that like I'm not really interested in your judgment on Christians.
I'm not really. I'm just saying that these people that you call secular Christians, Muslims, and they're liberals, and that is the problem. And
I don't think it's a problem. I don't want to debate liberalism. It's not why I'm creating this stream. Like I want to keep it consciousness focused. And there's a Judeo consciousness, there's a Christ conscious, there's a Muhammad conscious, the Buddha conscious, the Krishna conscious, and the nature of the Christ conscious leads to a fundamental principle of tolerance, and the nature of your Muhammad consciousness wouldn't necessarily lead to the fundamental principle of tolerance. In fact, you might even debate and say that you don't even think that tolerance is a good principle at all. And I don't want. We've had this debate countless times. That's not why I don't want to.
Okay,
I don't want to do these streams to just rehash debates.
I'm very happy to retire from the debate.
Or even to create a platform for you to repeat yourself on something that anybody could just go to your channel and listen to hundreds of hours of saying what you're about to say.
I know, but you asked me questions and you were talking about it, so I'll retire now.
Okay, so have a good night. Thanks for coming on. You have anything else, Jennifer, you want to talk about?
I'm happy to take it in whatever direction you want to go in. We can go over the debate more specifically if you'd like to. We can talk about our upcoming debate on God. Really, it's your channel, so I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm not. I guess there's people in the chat that hadn't been on. It was that guy. What is what is the Great Replacement? I couldn't see his whole name. If he's the one who super chatted those. And I didn't kick him. I guess he left voluntarily. But yeah, I'd like to promote my own channel, so to say. But it's difficult because I have so many divergent interests to just create like a open Bab stream where I like to be more systematic. So anyone who follows my channel knows that I like to make topical streams, and then the stream is basically all on that topic. And yeah, I do occasional open streams. And I like so Gandalf joined, but I'd like to keep this stream purely related to what the title is, the science of consciousness, specifically maybe even insights on what's going to happen in Switzerland that actually starts tomorrow. I will watch Jennifer, are you familiar? I'll put the link in the chat. I'm even going to screen share now. Have you watched in the past the science of consciousness streams?
I haven't gone into it yet. No. You mean on your channel?
No, I mean the Hammer Up Science of Consciousness conference that for years have been posted on YouTube.
Oh no, I haven't looked at those yet. I find most of the stuff is too cringy because I actually know the right answer. So listening to people try to fumble through some version of the correct answer or a completely wrong answer is a bit boring for me. I just tend to skim through things, look at the actual basic theory and the axioms, and then decide. And that's when that was what led me to Hammer Off there. And that's why I cite him sometimes, but I don't really go into his theory. I couldn't actually even tell you his theory from memory. I'm a bad scholar.
So here's last year's. Yeah, I mean, so me, I'm more scholarly, and my perspective on scholarship is very different to yours. But I mean, we don't have to, hash that out again. Maybe we'll formally try to structure debates between me and you that are done in a proper manner. But here's 3 years ago. This YouTube page, I guess there's different YouTube pages that have it. They have 3 years ago and 1 year ago, and they've had an East versus West panel for years, and you can see some of these are long, like 3 hours. Last year, you got Deepak Chopra here. This last one is David Chalmers. I could tell just by looking at him, his white hair and leather jacket, and they have PowerPoints and presentations. So here's the program of the conference, and it's got these different sessions, and the people speaking. So here's clinical neuroscience, and you got different people, Braun and professors, and so they'll put on YouTube the whole panel. That usually they have different speakers, or sometimes it's really big, it'll just be one speaker, and then they'll have questions, or sometimes they'll have a debate. And so you could see last year's conference, because it's over 2 or 3 days, and there's multiple sessions occurring at the same time. And some of these videos like hour and a half, some of them are like 3 hours. So almost all these sessions hopefully will be posted on YouTube, and I will probably watch all of them, and I'm looking forward to that because I like hearing the different theories, and they have the PowerPoints that are very good. And as I said, like in my channel when I did these, a lot of these were actually PowerPoints that I took from that are made public, that people who had the people that had spoken at the presentation made their PowerPoints public. So Professor Hamerov made his PowerPoint present, and David Chalmers. If you go to his webpage, you could find his PowerPoints that he gave as a presentation. So I'm looking forward to I'll probably watch all of them. And me and JF, we went to like the studies on pea plants and consciousness and Pavlovian learning, and that will be interesting, and the latest updates on the scientific evidence of microtubulars, and so I'm looking forward. I'll have weeks of YouTube watching to watch through all of that, and probably also these people publish papers in scientific journals, and I'll probably read through those. And if time willing, God willing, I'll make streams that I'll go over myself some of the PowerPoints that these people have created, in reading through the paper and overview. And if that's not your style of academic learning, we don't have to, we won't do that together. We could talk about it, but that's something I'll be doing.
Well, I think it would be beneficial to get some type of summary, but just going through the entire thing, I think it would be hard for the audience to remain focused on the subject for the whole time. And I guess if I'm streaming, I want to present the subjects in a way that people can actually follow it, and academics tend to struggle with that a little bit. So, but yeah, I'm excited to hear.
You're saying you would have actually went if it was applicable. It obviously would have been very expensive. The conference itself only cost $500, which it isn't nothing. But getting to Switzerland, passports, plane fare, hotel, probably would have cost thousands of dollars to go, and you had your passport and visas and all that stuff. But you said that you would have actually, if it was possible, you would have attended.
Yeah, it might have been fun. I've been to a lot of conferences before, and it can be a lot of fun.
Dooovid, real quick before I forget, I think I sent it to you in a PM. If you have requests for me for academic articles, like by specific authors, I have access to some stuff that I've managed to keep to some academic libraries, and I got a huge terabyte drive full of journals of all different kinds. So I might be able to help you find some stuff as PDFs if you want to read over original material. So just make sure you hit me up if you have trouble
Yeah, I
finding
appreciate that. A lot of the stuff is publicly available, but yeah, a lot of times I'll come on to, like I was showing my research for conversion, conversion to Judaism, and a lot of those papers are unavailable, or a lot of these books are extremely expensive, because like JF did a stream and making money off of it, and so you could go to the model of trying to make a substantial profit off of the few copies you sell, and so I have no limit of reading material. Like I was saying, I have about 500 books that I've bought and haven't read yet. Besides, but yeah, it comes like where things are immediately interesting to me, and I'd like to know. And if you have university accounts, I'm not. If I were currently like a University of Michigan student, I would have more access to that if I was a professor, or some of the times you have paid accounts, and a lot of them are expensive. If you go on like academia or something, it costs like $20 per article, or sometimes even be like $50, $100 for an article. So usually I'm pretty cheap like that. Like I'll buy books, and usually I don't like paying large sums of money for books. Occasionally, if I really want to know something. But yeah, I mean, if you're closer to academia or have access to that, like we could be in touch in the future about that.
Yeah, I have access. Well, I have a few friends, but I have some access, probably not full access to everything, but maybe like 70-80% of stuff. So because I definitely want to help. And by the way, I live in a house that has a Judaica
You've told me
library.
many times. Yeah, I mean.
Oh yeah, I have. Okay.
I'm of like I don't like people repeating themselves. Thank God
I'm sorry.
I've been blessed and cursed with a very good memory. To some ways a good memory is a curse, but in many ways it's a blessing. So like generally with me, you don't have to repeat yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, well, Dooovid, that makes you different because you know how many types of people I run into where I have to repeat myself.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that. And just saying, like I've even done streams on that and talked about that, and even sometimes, within Judaism, different things. Like sometimes there are people with very good memories, and you might only see them once every few years, and you could instantaneously jump right into where you left off with him the last time, and so God willing, thank God, I've been blessed with that, and God will maintain my intellectual abilities, and so I like to be, so if it was a person I hadn't spoke to in a while, that if I had the mental capacity, I would be able to jump right into the conversation where it left off, even if that had been years apart.
Yeah, so I'm sorry that I'm playing a little bit of catch up. I had some personal business I had to take care of in the suburbs today. So I missed a whole hell of a lot, and I really feel bad because I don't get to it's not like every day you get to go on JF, because JF is I consider that kind of an honor. It shows you that you're a serious person and people respect you, and well, I respect the way you think. So. What are some of the things that you're most excited about the upcoming conference, Dooovid? I mean, who are you most looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to all of it because I put a lot of research. So I mean, I feel like I didn't even know the conference existed. I came on to the conference in terms of research for my debate with JF, and it was a lot of like Deepak Chopra, but I looked into all of it because I wanted to know the current state of consciousness. And I think it paid off that my debate with JF on evolution was very well received. And, but at this point, I feel that I have a good feel for the current state of research. And I could say, now like, okay, I'm over 40, and I've done a lot of research. So within Judaism, a lot of times, like, some of the leading rabbis are people that, I been in school together with, and now they're leaders of congregations or even university. Business wise, people are becoming successful businessmen, or fulfilling important functions in society, and be like, oh, I was in school and worked together with those people. So I'm not at a point where I actually know those people. Like if you went to conferences, you might be in a situation where like, yeah, I've met that person. I had a chance to ask a question to them, or speak to them, or maybe become their friend on Facebook or some sort of correspondence. but at least just recognizing names. So I'm not at the point where I'm starting to know the names of the people at the top of the field, what their theories are, what the current areas of research are, and who's doing it. So I'm kind of excited about it to just in terms of my own understanding of the issues, to know internationally who are the people on top of the field, and think I like maybe in terms of alt right, it's became like that Dooovid and the alt right, like JF, Richard Spencer, Patrick Little, E. Michael Jones, hopefully soon Kevin McDonald, different people that, like I said, yes, I've conversed with them. Like if you mentioned, if you met Richard Spencer, Patrick Little, Jean Francis, and you're like, Dooovid, they'd be like, yeah, I know Dooovid. And so even within this little niche of YouTube streaming of dissident right wing, that they feel like even internationally, like Brutus the British and people in Australia and New Zealand, they feel like, okay, I'm on the top of my game, that I've appeared on the big shows, I've spoken to the big names, I know their ideas, and I even have them in the Rolodex, and that's largely thanks to the help of people like Luke Ford and Rundle Fly, Babs, Church of Entropy, people who've worked together with, and the Hare Krishna movements international. If you're mentioning like rabbis international, and so it's possible even if you're on the other side of the world, and it's like, well, who's your local rabbi? I would probably only be a few degrees where even I would be able to get in contact with your local rabbi. So even if you're Australia, New Zealand, England, I could probably get in contact with your local rabbi. And so I would like to have that kind of command of consciousness where I would talk to Hamarov and I would ask him questions. And obviously there's a lot of research, there's a lot of work. I put a lot of work into it. I put thousands of hours of work this year, and I basically stopped my life this year to study consciousness. I'm a civil engineer. I'm heavily involved. You see them on Facebook, engineering conferences and different things. And I basically hit pause on my life to say, I'm going to, basically take 25% of this whole year and completely dedicate that to studying consciousness. And, so I feel the power of the result of my effort that, that I'm, if I did it a whole another year, I could probably, be in the circles where I'm actually talking to these people and sharing ideas with them. So that's pretty exciting.
I'm excited for you. I mean, so I guess you're King David of the Rabbi International, and
I'm not King David. I dedicated 20 years of my life to Judaism. I studied in Jerusalem for 3 years. I studied in New York for multiple years, and I'm not even a rabbi, but I'm saying I know my Judaism. Saying I know the networks of Judaism. I know how it works. Like I have my picture of me and Jonathan Greenblatt, and I'm not necessarily like a big powerful Jew or something, but connected enough that I could get right up next to Jonathan Greenblatt and speak to him, and if it was important, I could probably get into contact with a rabbi anywhere around the world and speak to him. But obviously people are busy and have what they're doing, so I wouldn't just do it for no reason. So if I did it, there'd have to be a big reason. But like Melky, if he's still in the chat, Melky Tzedek, I was mentioned. I felt bad for him. He was in New York, and he was in Jew Central, and he didn't meet any Jews. Like if I were there, or even if he had reached out to me, maybe I would have told him like, you're in New York City. It's almost a bigger center of Judaism than Israel. Go to these major synagogues, go to these restaurants, meet these sages, and that I probably would have had enough connections, even though I'm here in Detroit, to give him names of people that would have met him, or go to this synagogue and speak to this person, and you'd be like, Dooovid, like I know Dooovid, and he would have been able to go to Williamsburg or Manhattan to the synagogue and say, oh, I know Dooovid, and he told me to come here. Unfortunately, he didn't reach out to me, but that I think that's that doesn't make me a big powerful Jew. It's just something that came from dedicating my adult life to Judaism.
Obviously, that's impressive. I live in a house with a very large Judaica library. And what, Dooovid, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. my screen just froze. I have a very large Judaica library. I have a pretty new copy of the Heavenly Torah by Abraham Joshua Heschel that I was on my book list, and I bought it maybe about a month ago. Haven't gotten to it yet. My book list is I still got 15 books out from the library. I got to get through the next 2-3 days, and I'm really gonna have to just scan and skim because I'm not quite as fast as you. I'm probably about half as fast as you, but faster than 98% of people at reading anyway. So I'm really impressed at speed reading, and eventually I'll need to learn how to do it because I need to I'm a little behind you in like being well read. And one of the things I deeply admire about you is like, well, you're one of the few people who can ever outread me, and so it's like I just love that because I'd rather like give me a cot in the library, like a really, really nice academic library like University of Illinois or Harvard, and just let me live there. As long as you give me a pot to piss in and some pizza to eat every day, I could probably be fine.
I think I said on Jennifer's stream the Hebrew expression is "Ein davar omid lifnei ratzon," is that nothing could stand in the way of a desire, and so it's really how bad do you want something, and you have to really desire knowledge. So even like university study, desiring prestige, desiring position, desiring livelihood, or desiring to get a good mate. Or whatever reason a person might put effort towards something isn't the same as true desire just to understand something. So for consciousness, that was something that I did almost purely off my desire personally. I want to understand this. And even Judaism, although it's my ancestral tradition, and hopefully one day it'll lead me to getting a good mate, and obviously Judaism has benefited me in many ways, in different ways, but honestly my desire was to understand it and to practice it.
Yeah.
And I went to rabbinic school not to be a rabbi, but to be a good Jew. And I think speed reading and knowledge will be that way for you, where you obtain knowledge the best. And I mentioned that, like, I'm a chess coach, and I've talked about that in the past, and I coach kids, and I say the kids who get best at chess are the ones that really just enjoy it. They study chess and they think about these patterns because it really interests them, as opposed to the ones that do it because they want to win a competition. And so I put it back to that Hebrew ein davar omid lifnei ratzon, that nothing could stand in the way of your desire.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, there's maybe is there it's the whole, I mean, to use like an Eastern Christian, maybe a metaphor that comes to mind is it's kind of like the holy desire of the holy fool. I mean, you know that you're always going to be bathed in the depth of the universe, but it's trying to penetrate as far deep into it as possible. I mean, that's a very Germanic myth,
If you took high birth or had good circumstances, good karma to lead you in a situation. So thank God I took high birth, and my parents have, my grandparents had a big library, and my father has a big library. I have a big library. So it's like, I always grew up with, great classics in ready access to me. My father is constantly buying awesome books. Like, I have no lack. I don't need a library because like I have enough resources and personal connection to access to a lot of things. And, whether you got your current status of access to that through, so to say, taking high birth or through work or accomplishment, it's more a question of desire for the knowledge of what's in the book. So you could have taken high birth and you could be, like Noam Chomsky's son or something like that. And, but you have to actually desire to read your father's books. And like, I dealt with famous rabbis that, their children, may not have had the desire to learn the knowledge, and they might know a certain amount by being close to it, but it's basically the desire. And when it comes to wisdom, the essential desire has to basically be to understand. That's why I said at the beginning of the stream when I was talking with Claire that, in the stream I did from one of my most powerful books I read, which is The Path of the Just, written by a rabbi in Italy a few hundred years ago, that talked about most people are not bothered by the essential spiritual questions. Why are we here? What's the meaning of life? What happens when we die? And generally, it's more, adults and stupid people that seem to be concerned with it. So it's a very rare great mind that will dedicate themselves to these issues, and saying that Rabbi Nachman, a famous rabbi, it has to really bother you that you're saying, it hurts me that I don't have the answers to these questions. It hurts me that I don't understand this enough that you're willing to struggle and work at it. And, generally, as the sages say, according to the work is according to the reward, according to the toil is the knowledge. And, so a lay independent scholar like Dooovid, who, I didn't have tremendous resources, but, I was in a situation where I just worked part-time. I didn't have to, I could largely have leisure to study. I didn't have like resources to buy the most expensive books or travel to these conferences, but I had enough that I, had the majority of the day to study and enough to purchase a lot of books and material. And but it was really my struggle because I wanted answers to these questions, and I was willing to dedicate thousands of hours of my time to trying to answer these questions, even though there may be no reward for my research besides for my own personal, now I understand this.
Well, I think you can get some rewards, but at some point you have to decide which path you're going to go down, if you're going to accept the quantum mind or the physical mind, because those are the possible axioms you can choose, and you can't really build up a theory in order to understand anything better without actually choosing. So have you picked one that you're seeing as the default hypothesis, Dooovid, or are you still kind of up in the air, or you think science can't answer the question of consciousness?
Yeah, I think we've discussed this in the past, and I say I'm capable of living with extremely large amounts of dissonance. So, largely due to you and circumstances like, Professor Hamerov working with the Hare Krishna movement and different things, I've chosen to, work towards Hamerov Penrose. And I actually have Penrose's book on mathematics, and it's very complicated. And like, I got stuck at like Fourier transforms and conformal mapping. So like, I have this huge book on like how the universe works, which is supposed to be like the history of everything you need to know about mathematics and physics. And like, I'm still stuck at like page 100. It's on my desk. And like I showed that chart to like on your channel yesterday of all the different major theories. And I would like to be able to read through all those things and watch their videos and even meet those people and go to the conferences. But time is limited. But generally, I'm willing to work with substantial amounts of dissonance. So I'm not the type person to cast a vote. In fact, like, I don't vote when it comes to elections. So it's not my nature to say, like, I'm going to go with this. It's more a question of how I use my time, and then I'm willing to operate with substantial amounts of dissonance.
Well, if that's your choice, you're never going to have any foundational knowledge, because truth is a unique thing. So
I have foundational knowledge, but I don't have a stamp to say, I've gave approval to one or the other, or to say that, in my opinion, I know enough about the issue to, to say. It'd be one thing if I, saying I'm wary about how I use my time and how I advance. And it's like, if you have to choose a guru to fall behind and if, okay, I'm not big enough to lead, so I need to find a leader to follow. And, generally you have to, find a leader and follow. Like I showed the video yesterday of the rabbi who's building the biggest synagogue in Brooklyn. And I chose to follow him, even though, there's a lot of reasons, like, okay, they're bigger rabbis, and, do I really want to follow this rabbi? But I needed a rabbi to follow. And, so this rabbi had a lot to go for, a long tradition. He's building the biggest synagogue in Brooklyn. So I'm going to follow him, even though there might be, a whole bunch of different reasons to, follow different people. And if that's what you mean in terms of quantum consciousness, yeah, like, okay, I'm following Hamerov Penrose in that sense, that's the, currently what I'm following.
Well, they can't, it's not about choosing a guru. The thing is, those two theories can't both be true. Either the mind is quantum or it's physical. And if you want to try to study all of the different theories in all of those fields, well, it's going to be hard to actually get any real understanding without actually knowing which side. Like, you have to do your own, you have to make your own decision to some extent. Which of the two theories do you think is more likely to be correct? Because they can't both be correct. Only one of them is correct.
That could be. But I'm saying I basically paused on my life for a year to, be able to put a whole bunch of time into studying this, and still the precursors are vast. to understand quantum consciousness, it's almost the pinnacle of knowledge where you need to know, basically you need a mastery of almost all of the sciences and philosophy, really just to have an opinion on the issue. So unfortunately, it's an extremely complicated issue that even hitting, am I going to hit pause on my life for another year? And like, do I really want to work through a whole bunch of problems on eigenvectors and linear algebra and differential equations and, quantum mechanics in order to really understand these theories? And, that's what I said yesterday in the song I sang, like, even if I were to live for thousands of years, I would just scratch the surface and, time is ticking, my hair is turning white. I still haven't found the right woman and reproduced. And even like I studied civil engineering, I'm supposed to be putting up buildings. I have a lot of different things like, manufacturing. I'm here in Detroit. I'm going to a conference tomorrow, displaying, a demonstration of the most recent technologies for like facilities management. And that's something like I could probably be working, making possibly large sums of money involved in construction and manufacture, but I chose to pause on my life for a year to get dedicated to studying these issues. So it's very difficult, and that's why I was mentioning, the sages. The sages are the people that, that said, I want to answer these questions. And you yourself, I mean, I don't know where your take on it. I mean, you feel, like a cult personality, you guru, you have followers, and where you've given yourself over to the public, and you need to know these things in order to advise and lead other people, let alone understanding these things. And it's a simple thing like, okay, my main desire is to make it to heaven or make it back to Godhead. And how do you get back to Godhead? How do you make it to heaven? And there's no, really definitive answer. It's like Claire, well, just be a good person, you'll make it to heaven.
Yeah.
And to some extent, it's that simple, but but obviously it's more complicated than that.
Yeah, a lot of people have offered opinions on this throughout the ages about what it is that gets you enlightenment and what works the best. So again, like you said, you have to choose at some point who you're going to accept their testimonial authority. Because at some point you have to put your faith in another human to explain something to you if you don't understand it. So that's where science comes in that helps you, like, who has the best result? Therefore, they must be the most correct because they have the best result. And so I think based on that, it's pretty easy to reject the physical mind hypothesis for the origin of consciousness because it's been disproven so many times, and there's so many things, there's so many phenomena that
I've completely rejected. I mean, I'm taking the spiritual approach and belief in the soul, and so as of now, I'm almost completely dedicated to the quantum model. I'm still dedicated like to the Kabbalah and the Jewish tradition and Hinduism, but in terms of science, there's still more aspects of the classical, neurological model that I'm continuing to research. But I said the precursors to understanding the quantum mind are so vast that it's almost daunting.
Well, not really. I mean, you don't need to understand the entirety of quantum field theory to understand the basis of quantum mechanics. You just have to understand the Copenhagen interpretation. And that's why I've presented the material the way that I did. There's no mathematical formulas really in it. It's for people like you who don't have that background. Because
I have a pretty strong background in mathematics. Saying like I took through differential equations. Like I have here in my background advanced engineering for mathematics, and like let alone a layperson like my mother who didn't even take algebra. Like I'm an engineer who's relatively extremely good with calculus, but even that isn't enough mathematics for quantum consciousness.
You need to be able to visualize things because you need to visualize how consciousness might work and what form it may take. And that requires you to perceive things in 3 dimensions with your imagination. And I think this is something a lot of people struggle with because they don't have enough practice and they're used to kind of delegating that duty to things like video games, like their imagination is performed by TV rather than themselves. So that's why I try to get people to start thinking about these things and so forth. And you have this noble goal to get a conclusion about the origin of consciousness. But if you can't take a stance axiomatically at some stage, you're not going to be able to find the answer because your mind's just going to be clogged up with too much other information. It's not going to be sorted in any meaningful way.
Yeah, there's so many. That's why I was talking about streaming. I think Bad Goy's here, and he was, he tagged me on Twitter on something on the Peasants Revolt, and I actually watched that. And like time is so short. That's why I sang that song the other day, like Lo yik ye givar shani nolfin lo ya yil give take v'chishbinaya. It was like even if I were to live for thousands of years, I would still not be able to scratch the surface of God's wisdom. And it's like the Peasants' Revolt and European history and the Crusades, and there's so many things I'm interested in. And time is just so short. And like I haven't left Detroit in years. I haven't traveled anywhere. Saying like, let alone my mother's retired, and now thank God they're traveling. Relatively frequently. My father's still practicing as a doctor, but he's also been able to run his office and take time. So they thank God they're traveling all the time now. But I haven't even left Detroit for years, because just time is so short and there's so much to do. Let alone I don't have a family, like kids to raise. So most of my contemporaries are bounded by the material necessity of taking care of a family. Like if I'm one of my biggest disappointments is I haven't been able to find the right woman, and I don't have children. But at the same time, if I had a wife and children, I would probably have not been able to do what I did this year. I would have had to, been working and supporting my family. So it's, very, very complicated decisions, and there's always trade-offs.
Yeah, that's true. We aren't really so much restricted in a temporal fashion because we reincarnate forever until we reach enlightenment. And most humans are so far from enlightenment. I put it at around 200,000 years before they can even start to think about getting enlightenment. So you have tons of time. But I guess I don't think studying is really meaningful until you actually have your axioms down pat. So I just don't want you to be disappointed in your research and just go in circles and waste your time. I'm just sharing my own.
I'm very careful not to waste time, and it's like it might waste time. Like someone could look at God forbid Judaism a waste of time, or studying quantum consciousness as a waste of time, and I don't consider that wasting time, or Hinduism, because I don't consider obtaining knowledge as a waste of time. But within my pursuit of knowledge, I'm extremely careful about how I spend my time. That's why I made my streams, and that's why like I'm looking for people to I'm looking to the streamosphere as a method to be able to advance the scholarship.
Did you want to jump on, Gandalf? You haven't talked in a while.
Forex Shark, like he hasn't reached out to me, and it's like maybe like any of you ever see the movie Pi?
Yeah, Life of Pi, you mean?
No, it was kind of like an obscure small movie about like this mathematical genius, and he's being hounded by like the mafia that want him to beat the stock market, and he's also being like hounded by these rabbis because they want him to like figure out the Kabbalah. It's kind of a stupid movie, but I think it's just called Pi, and it may not even have been major production, never in theaters. But it's kind of like
Pi. I'm looking for it now.
So Forex Shark, okay, I'm friends with him on Discord, and we did that stream, and like Bitcoin, went up a whole bunch, and he's right, and I think he made a whole bunch of money off of it, and he just bought himself like a 4-unit property. God bless him. Hopefully he's making millions of dollars. God bless him. And I was very good at stock trading. Thank God I made a substantial sum of money. I made sums of money for other people when I did it, and always thought about going back into doing it. But it takes so much effort to try to look into what these companies are doing, the charts and the different things. But at the end of the day, like if I were doing Forex Shark and finances, there's a some tally of like $1. You get dollars in your pocket to show the reward of your effort. Knowledge is different, although I think knowledge is superior to money. That knowledge has a superior value, and in many ways you could produce the value. Like when you're an expert, like, okay, I've demonstrated somewhat my expertise on Judaism from the fact that or knowledge that JF invited me on his stream, that presumably or Zed does getting me on. I appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, that's purpose of the week in review. Like a lot of people, are hopefully going to come around to the concept of the week in review of, so personally, I'm a religious man. I pray constantly. I repent and go over every day before I go to sleep what I did during my day and how to improve myself. But even, in public prayer, but even having, a colleague like Church of Entropy and other people who, learn the value of a week in review to, that we could come and talk about this and to mutually benefit ourselves.
Well, I got to tell you, like, I especially after this past week, I was deeply annoyed that I missed like a half hour of you and Tyrone potentially interacting because Jen and Claire, well, Claire mostly, are having such a big issue. It's just like the week in review is almost like religious time for me now. Like I feel like I'm going to get a good deep summary of all the major debates going on and in the spheres of the internet that we all seem to sort of have met each other in. And I kind of really enjoy the commentary and deep reflection. Like I could use it because I need people to help kind of keep me focused so they know I'm just not going all over the place. I mean, in a strange sort of way, I'm extremely focused in the sense that, even if I'm multitasking online, I'll have a book right next to my computer and I'll be flipping through it as I go, tagging stuff. I got a notepad that's going on with certain thoughts and ideas I'm going on from a book, and then I'm online reading something. I mean, I usually like multitask, try and do 3 or 4 things at a time. That somehow seems to work, but I think I need to make sure I'm much more topical and sticking with topics that other people in our, I guess, arena are looking into. And that's why I appreciate the Week in Review so much. I mean, it's actually kind of like, if I can't do Sunday Week in Review, why have a Monday?
I used to kind of, joke, and there's some truth to it. Like, I was kind of a geek and unpopular and a loser, and thinking like, like no one ever invited me to a party. Like I didn't have any friends like calling, wanting to hang out. And then maybe I had periods of my life that were maybe largely due to financial success or whatever reason where I was more popular. And then I'm getting to the point where, I got more parties and things going on than I could go to. That there's multiple parties the same night and I can't go to all of them. And generally, a person would prefer to be in the position of having more friends and more what to do than they're capable of doing. And like it was very depressing being a loser and having no friends and never getting invited to any parties or so on and so on. But there's a certain benefit of the time, and the Week in Review is necessary. So thank God if I'm on a little bit of success, and hopefully we'll all have increasing success. And so let's say you had JF, Luke Ford, Halsey, No Apology, the constant people wanting to book you for your show, and you could be on any of these shows all the time. And even if you were like a guru who could travel, you had invitations and people even willing to pay for your transportation and pay you to come to go all over the world. And God willing, we'll all be in that situation. But you need colleagues. You need to be able to discuss things with them. Like Jim Rashidi's in the chat talking about Charles Moskowitz and things. Like I streamed with him 3 times. They were pretty good shows. And then he told me he's going to get back to me, and he didn't get back to me. And I was just so busy, I didn't message him. And so that kind of, we haven't done it. Maybe we'll get back together. And it's like, okay, Kevin McDonald. Like, yeah, I might be able to, get Kevin McDonald on my stream. That'd be awesome. I emailed him today. Hopefully he'll email me back. Who knows what's going to happen? And hopefully doors will start opening for all of us. And the Week in Review will actually become more and more important. Maybe historically, maybe when you're a loser and have nothing to do, you also need like a colleague for, the 2 geeks that, the 2 losers that, team up to each other and share each other's misery and, try to at least get invited to one party or something like that, that a week in review is, probably, and because, I've been a loser and rejected in my life, that I'm always very careful, and we've discussed it in Church of Entropy. I don't like rejecting people. I don't like being mean to people, and I have a special place in my heart to, no matter what my situation, I would like to say I would stop and help somebody, even if, I had the great opportunity to do something great, that, there's a Hasidic understanding that, like, I'm not someone's gonna stick their hand out to me. I don't want to leave them empty-handed. That's not who I want to be.
Yeah, I can respect that.
And
Yeah,
even my main desire, like I would rather, help people in need than advance myself to a certain. I'd like to advance myself and be part of elite networks, but and you got to make time, and I always encourage people to volunteer, and thank God my volunteer activities are going very well. Like chess coaching and food distribution with Hare Krishnas, and there's a lot of things that are going extremely well, and it makes for a well-rounded person to have that view.
Yeah, I think I guess what I like. I mean, I don't know. I just there's something just about your personality, and your just way of doing things that I feel like I mesh with. I'm a little different than you. I guess I consider myself. I'm a kind person, but I'm also much more ferocious, Vatic, temperamental. I mean, it's the German-Irish blood, and I don't know how it comes through.
I think like last night we was like, like if I went to a party and you invited me there, and then like I saw that there were like a bunch of people who didn't like me, and then you're there, it's like, don't be mean to Dooovid. Like that's not my personality. I probably wouldn't go to something like that. Like, 'cause
Yeah.
I don't like streaming people on. I did the the narcissism test on Brundlecast, and people were surprised by my answers, but saying, you only know me from streaming. Generally, I'm pretty introverted and pretty private. I prefer to spend my time reading, or only go places where I have business or something that fits into my life goal plans. Doing and but you need colleagueship, you need camaraderie, you need experts, you need and hopefully the streaming will be able to find a nice middle ground of helping people, giving people a chance, helping people build their stream. Like Erica, the harsh reality, people reached out, or even like someone who wants to ask basic questions of Judaism. It's like, don't you know what you're talking about? Like, you think I'm gonna waste my time answering like these simple questions? But then because I've read the sages and the Talmud, and I know, like, yes, like from my knowledge, the greatest sages somehow had the time to help out the poor, to answer simple questions, to visit the sick, and so on and so on. So,
Yeah.
It has to be from a studying of the sages, and recognition that even though it might appear from a materialistic perspective that I had enough grounding in dedication to studying of important wisdom to know that the sages did not compose themselves in that manner. That the sages always had time to help out people in need, and care about other people, and saw the illusions of popularity and self-advancement. They think that's all false, or that's not the path that I'm choosing for myself.
Well, I would say I think I probably was a little more that way when I was younger. I mean, I'm still not that way. I think I'm kind of just more consolidated around close friends. I mean, I got a few people that I'm deeply involved with a lot of things, and it taxes me quite a bit. I think I'm very friendly and talkative with people, but I'm much more introverted than I might appear at first glance. Like, there are many days, like, when I'd work all sorts of, odd jobs and whatnot, I just dreaded going into work because it's not because I didn't want to do work. It's because I didn't want to have to see people.
Yeah, I think a lot of experts are introverted. Like, I didn't, even JF, there were 500 people watching, because I felt comfortable in the subject matter. I wasn't really nervous or public speaking in general. I'm not good at public speaking, but when it comes to, knowledge of my accomplishments, and saying like, it gives a platform. My mother, was always talk about being introverted, even though she became a top lawyer. And she's in the courtroom or at a board meeting. If it's an area of her expertise, she's not embarrassed to publicly speak in sense of duty, where like, okay, I've done the work, now it's time to put in my function in society. But at the end of the day, I'm an introvert. I'm always going to be an introvert, even though I might for periods of time be able to act within the realm of extroversion.
Yeah, I mean,
And even like at the end of the day, what I really want to do is sit and study and read my books and think about my ideas. So even if I'm enjoying public and well received and well liked, or getting invited to parties and meeting people and having fun, really, like, in my heart, I'm torn, because I'd like to just be in a corner and catching up on my reading.
on the same way, my days are books and podcasts are my preferable ways to spend most days. And, I don't like leaving my house other than take my dog out and run to the store most of the time, or run to the library. I mean, that's pretty much it. If I had my choice, it's the library, which thankfully is right off a train stop, so I don't have to walk any way through the city as it crumbles around me. Or it's going to the store just to get basic stuff around. There's a big box store, and there's, a supermarket here, and I'm good with that. Like, I've never, even when I was really, really young, other than maybe like a couple of my Tonka truck toys that were my favorite toys growing up, and my books, my Richard Scarry books are my favorite children's novels when I was a kid. But it was always much, my trucks and my books, and I didn't want anything else. Like when I was really young, I don't know if you had this kind of experience. You could leave me alone upstairs in my room in the corner of my parents' small house in suburban Chicago, right? And I'd be playing with my books and my trucks. And other than when I had to go to the bathroom or get more milk, you could leave me alone when I was almost 3 years old for 2-3 hours, and I'd be fine. And everyone's like, "He really is like that?" I'm like, yeah, he is. So yeah. So when you were that young, were you that introverted too? Like, I mean, I found preschool to be just traumatic as hell.
Yeah, I looked at like some of my early report cards. Like, I always worked best. I could have been misbehaved or mischievous, but generally I worked best by myself, and either had a small number of friends, a handful of close friends, or even no friends, and spent the majority of the time by myself. And even, I said, in my better times, when I was more popular and there was more desire from other people to be close to me, generally I'll push people off, because I like my privacy, and I prefer to spend the majority of the time by myself. In fact, I've recommended this book. Oh, I don't have it. I have Anthony Storr, a book on solitude, and I highly recommend Anthony Storr. Wrote a book on solitude. I have his book on music and the brain. I don't have it in my library, but I've read it before and highly recommend it.
Storr meaning Storr.
Yeah, Anthony Storr.
Didn't he write a book on sociopathology, on sociopathy?
Maybe.
Oh, no, that's Martha Stout. I'm sorry. I got that confused.
There's Alice Miller, The Trauma of the Gifted Child. It's also a good book. But yeah, Anthony Storr on solitude is more related to what we're talking about. And, it's people who accomplished great things in terms, great artists or thinkers, scientists, and examines their life and says that most of those people spent almost all of their decades of their life in solitude.
It reminds me of when I was really young, and I'm still this way. Like, okay, Dooovid, I love natural disasters. I love natural disasters. There's like 3 or 4, like storms. Storms in particular just fascinate me. Like the way the clouds build up and billow, and the way they kind of just like ring out all that rain, and the lightning and the thunder, the ionization of the air, the smell of a storm as it comes. I mean, I used to love watching like the way the wind would eddy. And that reminds me of a story of Leonardo da Vinci. Apparently, when he was 3 or 4 years old, he'd go down to the stream behind the town, behind his house. He would just spend hours staring at the way the water would flow and around rocks and form eddies, as it's just the fluid mechanics of the river. And I'm thinking, yeah, I mean, I think he was kind of like that. I mean, I bet you a young Leonardo da Vinci was just insanely introverted. I mean, is there a connection? And I'll look at the Storr book. there's also that book that was written 5-6 years ago called Quiet by Nancy whatever. I'll put it in the chat. There's another one. Nancy Kane, maybe. Susan Kane, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. I'll send that to you. I'll put that in the chat for you. Because I'm really kind of interested in I'm wondering if there is a connection between being a genius and being introverted. Like, can extroverts be geniuses? Is it possible?
Yes,
like,
It's not even clear that there is such a thing as introvert versus extrovert, frankly. But I do think most people who are really smart tend to keep to themselves more because they don't suffer idiots easily.
yeah, I would think that'd be the case.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, yes, I don't want to turn this to a Babs cast and keep it related to the topic of consciousness and, at hand, because I'm, that's part of, introversion, and I like to have purpose to my interactions to, like even just talking for the sake of talking usually. I don't have desire. Probably why I fell nicely into Orthodox Judaism, because it was so structured that there's no small talk. So you go into synagogue and you're actually not supposed to talk to each other, and you just go straight into the prayer. And there's like a formal structure where a person starts the prayer. And if someone's learned, the teachings, say, well, we're actually not supposed to talk. We're here to pray. And so I fell very nicely into that formal structure where even small talk was, frowned upon or religiously forbidden.
Yeah. What was I going to say? So back to I would say I just wanted to, I've kind of wanted to get to know you better for a while, and I'm a little bit different. I mean, this is, and let's tie this back to consciousness, but I'm a little bit
a
more
man of ideas. When you say, like, you want to know me better, what's behind Dooovid? And it's like, okay, Doovid's a man of ideas who spends the majority of my time thinking about multiple things that have bothered me my whole life. And at this point, you could see, the books on my
well, that's part of getting to know you.
Still a library, and so the way to Doovid's art is by being interested in the same things I'm interested in, and
well, you might find a kindred spirit here, because like I operate a little bit differently, but more like you maybe than other people. I mean,
I had that discussion with Church of Entropy on her channel with Elliot, when I was talking about treat people the way they want to be treated, and it's very difficult because different people want to be treated in a different way. Some people, want to be, made laugh. Some people want to be left alone, and so you have to get to know the person to be able to. You have to have a certain tolerance and respect and intuition to be able to treat people the way they like to be treated. And if you have a large amounts of people, and you treat them all differently because you recognize that different people want to be treated in a different way. So let's say, okay, if you know Dooovid well, maybe you don't even say hello to me because, it's okay, that's Dooovid. He's not into small talk. He doesn't really want to say hello, so either, we're going to jump right into talking about where we left off once and advancing the ideas, or we're just kind of, give each other a nod and acknowledgement and, not even waste each other's time with small talk. There's certain, treat people the way they want to be treated. And in other people that they might, that's not the way they want to be treated. It's like, how come you didn't say hello to me? How come, you didn't ask me, about how I'm doing or something like that, as opposed to Dooovid. It's like, damn it, Gandalf, if you ask me how I'm doing one more time, I'm going to offend you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Possible to treat people the way they want to be treated. How the hell would you know how people want to be treated?
It was intuition. Sometimes you have to ask.
But how do you know that their testimony is going to be reliable when people would almost assuredly lie if you ask them that question?
Well, you have to build a trust level, or you have to know whether a person's, would they lie? Or are they telling the truth? Or where you break down the social communication barriers and saying, like, you understand there's Doovidism, there's Clarism, there's Church of Entropy, Gandalf, whatever your personality. You slowly get to know people, and you say, okay, this is Doovidism, and you appreciate Doovidism for what it is, and then you could be friendly with Doovid, and we could so to say roll together, work together, do business together, advance ideas together, but you have to be comfortable with Doovidism and your entropyism or whatever that is, and you're saying, at this point, why would I really? What would be, okay, why would I lie? Or if there's a defense mechanism where
not you, Dooovid, not you. I'm saying people in general. Like if I went up to someone, not you, just some random person, said, "Hey, how would you like me to treat you?" They would probably give me an answer that was false, because people don't really have enough self-awareness to know how exactly they want to be treated. That's why my solution is like protocols, like, for example, no ad homs, because most people can agree on that, except Claire, and her opinion doesn't matter. So yeah, that's more. I'm more about
tolerance and respect. Claire puts it to well, what about homosexuals or something like, or you get tolerant? But generally, tolerance and respect are good principles.
Tolerance is a pretty abstract concept, because it's like, where do you draw the line? If someone else is
I'm not your judge.
If
I'm
someone,
not your judge, I'm not your enforcer.
I'm just saying, like, if someone's being pushy, then at what point do you, when do you stop tolerating the behavior that you don't like?
There's Michael. It's Michael in the chat saying Dooovid is comfortable with my anti-Semitism, and that's a warm feeling. And to some extent, I am tolerant even to people, even to the gas station, so to say. Okay, if you have to defend yourself or something like that. But I'm generally pretty tolerant. You get Claire in saying homosexuality or something like that, or something like, I'm tolerant even to things that I disagree with or find disgusting, and I might not want that in my house. Think I have a private space of my house. In public, I'm basically excessively tolerant. Almost never will you find me in public, admonishing or calling a person out or something like that. But who I choose to bring into my closer association I'm not so tolerant in that. In my house or something, okay, if you smoke cigarettes or chewed gum or didn't like taking your shoes off or something like that, I probably just wouldn't invite you into my house. And if it's something okay, you didn't know that Dooovid really hates people chewing gum or something, and I didn't have the the ability to tell a person, that you just found out, I stopped taking the person calls or inviting him into my house, and what would happen? And it turns out I have certain pet peeves that I wasn't able to live with. But in public, I would be exceedingly tolerant.
Well, yeah, I guess I'm somewhat similar. When I try and be let's say I have dinner over at your house, I'm the visitor, someone else is the host. When it comes to dinner and stuff like that, I'm someone's can I help you bring something, a supply from the store ahead of time, and then afterwards, can I help you, pick up and stuff like that. And people have to remember, even on an online behavior, your else's stream, you're kind of in someone else's internet home. So imagine, I'm in Doovid's house. That's kind of how I've approached it. You know what I mean? So I try and hopefully do a good job.
Claire is, there's different personality types, and they might extroversion or different things where generally Dooovid doesn't go where he's not wanted. Usually go where people have business. I like to avoid conflict. And other people, might have more, if you're extroversion or different personalities, where they don't mind going to places where they're not wanted, or they don't mind trying to make other people conform to their will. I have no ability to try to make people conform to my will. It's not really within me. So if things aren't pleasant to the way I want, I'm more likely to leave and choose my association. But there are personality types. Maybe Claire might be an example that likes to try to go places and have people conform to their will, and maybe even people might even come to your house and do that and be like, you got to liven things up, and saying that's not I would be extremely wary of having association. But in the public space, there's the Dooovid, how I act in public, and then there's the Dooovid in my private association, treat people the way they want to be treated. So it's difficult to understand how people, and I'm a, box of paradoxes, like, okay, I'm an Orthodox Jew, I'm kosher, I'm vegetarian, I have Hindu leanings, I have a bunch of pet peeves. And, so to come into my personal space, you might have a long list of kind of like, Doovidism that you have to become familiar with. And that's also part of like when I served important people, there are people who, give you that information, so it's okay, Dooovid, you have to take your shoes off to go into my house. And, so if you don't take your shoes off, I'm a vegetarian or something like that. If you can't conform to those basic rules, you're not going to get into my house. You're not going to get invited back. But, if you had a camaraderie with other people, so to say, other people would do that precursors for you. So, when I served eccentric people like Babs, I tried to Jean-Louis Bourgeois, who I wasn't able to hook him up, but I was his personal assistant, very famous, the daughter of Louise Bourgeois, eccentric multimillionaire, whatever. But he was extremely eccentric, and I was extremely good with dealing with his eccentricities. And you're saying like, I don't know why that's the way he wants it. That's the way he wants it. I do it the way he wants it. I don't really ask too many questions. And, so it's a certain skill to treating people. It might come out of compassion or respect, where you look at people with respect and you're actually interested in understanding them and interested in, like, I want to be a good person. I want to treat people the way they want to be treated, and due to, the ein devar omid lifnei ratzon, that nothing stands in the way of desire, that if you truly desire to be close to a person and understand how they want to be treated, that, the desire will allow you to figure out how they want to be treated and treat the person in that manner.
Yeah.
Yeah,
JF or something like that. I think I was.
There's no way to do that.
Well, even JF with his eccentricities, like, how is it possible that Dooovid and JF are friends? JF is like a leading alt-right nationalist, hard on the, like, I mean, but somehow Dooovid and JF are able to get along because, maybe we have a skill of treating people the way, okay, he's got his eccentricities, and I'm cool with that. I'm not going to bother him. I'm not going to call him out with the things he doesn't want to be called out, and I'm willing to respect the rules of his space in a way that somehow we could get along.
Well, that's because he's made the rules obvious and you're just conforming to the rules out of politeness, and that's awesome. But that's not the same thing as treating someone the way they want to be treated. I'm just saying I don't think this is realistic. Like, how could someone ever figure out how I want to be treated? Right? It's just so abstract, right?
Well, I mean, you can't be a perfect treat, but there could be, in many ways, saying like, over time you learn a bunch of things. I mean, so you see, like, Hindus have a lot of it, like where you have, I mean, it could be, group selection strategy where you're in extremely high dense population centers where it makes sense that you service people that are greater than you. So when I became a Hasidic Jew, I served, rabbis and people who were leaders. Like, I wasn't a leader, and to be involved, I, basically became a servant to, bigger rabbis, or even a servant to a servant to a servant, so to say. Like, I saw, this rabbi is building the biggest synagogue in Brooklyn. I'm not going to be his personal servant, but I could be a servant to one of his servants, so to say. And through that, you slowly learn how a person wants to be treated by saying, okay, this guy's pretty tight with this guy. And then you start getting the information from that person. And then once you make it into that person's personal space, you start picking up things, and you might, through keen observation, saying that, just observation and seeing that's how a person does things. That's how a person carries themselves. And, I think it comes to the desire. It's like, that you can't know what's on a person's heart or all the peculiarities and pet peeves of a person, but you could pay attention and you could constantly be learning.
Sure. I guess my approach is just to have protocols. no ad homs, for example. I mean, for a while, my protocols were unspoken because I was talking to people who were just naturally respectful. Like you and I have never had a problem. You know, most people I talked to never had a problem, but Claire caused a problem. So I had to institute the no ad homs protocol. And I think that really helps a lot. But in terms of like whether I feel like people are actually treating me the way I want to be treated, well, I would say that's not the case really for anyone. And nor do I think it's a realistic expectation to have. I just don't want you to be disappointed. That's all.
Well, there's two aspects of the do no harm and fulfillment of desire. So it's like, obviously, say, okay, well, no one's ever treated me like I want to be treated, because like I want people to just like lavish me with, gifts and honor or things that are impractical versus, or like I want to be unconditionally loved no matter what I do, or whatever type, fantasies that a person has when they say treat a person the way they want to be treated, versus, do no harm. And the Judeo version of the golden rule is don't do unto others that which you don't want done upon yourself, as opposed to do unto others that which you want done upon yourself. So you could take that perspective of at least, like the no ad homs, tolerance and respect, and maybe you as, I'm going to call you a secular Catholic, but at least looking at your background, where it's telling Claire that like, no ad homs might go in with, a general view of your secular Christian who left their Christianity, but keeps the general principle of tolerance and respect. And so we say, okay, no ad homs, at least I didn't do any harm. So
that's not from Catholicism. That's just from understanding how debates are supposed to happen and knowing that ad homs don't further a debate.
I mean, just in debate, but in terms of personal interactions, obviously, we don't know each other in real life. But in terms of, personal interaction, if you just say like, I never do ad homs, I try never, like if I could, God forbid, I don't want to take a vow and break a vow, but saying, if I could live the rest of my life never ad homing somebody, that's probably a positive thing. In terms of your personal interactions, if you just took like I don't insult people, I don't pick on people because they're different, I don't like causing harm to people, in the do no harm aspect, that's an important step towards treating people the way they want to be treated, versus on the positive aspect of, so okay, Doovid's not much into small talk. So like saying, hello, how you doing? Asking me a bunch of questions, to me, that's harmful. I don't want to be pestered with a bunch of questions. I don't want to even be asked how I'm doing. But at the same time, I might want to be asked about like ideas or what I'm researching, what I'm reading, or different things. And so, there's the first aspect of do no harm. Don't do what this person finds irritating, and then to put yourself into the positive, to do what this person finds enjoyable.
Sure, I think both of those things are extremely unrealistic just for talking to people on the internet. It's realistic to expect certain things from your friends, but even that, I don't think people can actually explain why they have the friends that they do, by and large. So, yeah, it's
I
a tough
agree with you in terms of a providence. But even internet streaming is saying that there's, there's certain personality types that it's like, okay, don't interrupt people. So like Dooovid can't not interrupt people or something like that. That's not my nature, because I get bored quickly or my mind jumps a lot. And, so like if so I may not, so like I hate being interrupted. Dooovid interrupts me, and like, I just can't stand that guy. Or maybe it's a reasonable claim, and I'd be like, you're right, I'm sorry, but like that's who I am. So maybe we can't associate with each other without coming into harm, because we have different methods. So streaming etiquette, and talking about, like, me and Brundle had a lot of streams about streaming etiquette. Luke Ford and the creation of rules of etiquette, me and you have had multiple streams about that. And just the fact that we openly talked about it is a moving and trying to, it might be impossible, but you can move in that direction. Just the fact that we're willing to have conversations about it is a sign of something positive.
Oh, I think so too. And I would like to proceed with as few protocols as possible. Gandalf, you're echoing right now.
How am I echoing? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I'm not even sure we need to impose any more axioms other than the no ad homs one / I can say whatever I want. Because obviously there has to be someone there to impose harm on those who want to do us harm, right? Because just the whole do no harm is just basically sitting around waiting to die. If you're not going to defend yourself, your lofty ideals are meaningless.
Because you want to be the king of your own castle too. So that, as I said, there's a difference between treating people how they want to be treated in their own private space, in your private space, and in a public space. I mean, that's Pilpul and Talmud, because the Talmud actually has like hundreds of pages that go into these differentiations and trying to decipher the truth, and the Pilpul type method that might differentiate. Well, what if it's in their private space? What if it's in your private space? What if it's in a mutual, or different forms of public spaces? And like Claire was talking about, well, isn't it just simple? And saying, well, it's somewhat simple, but then at the same time it gets extremely complicated very quickly. And so it's the person who recognizes that it requires thought, it requires conversation, it requires study.
Oh yeah, absolutely, it does. But that could take years, so we have to have some kind of working model for now. And I think the one we have is actually working, because you've been able to keep this stream under control, and people are pretty well behaved, I'd say, in general. So what do you think? Do you think we need to add more protocols, or can we just keep the no ad homs? And
I'd add a second.
Yeah, I'm not really a protocol type. Usually I'm just kind of increase association with the people that seem to usually I'm just increase association with the people that seem to jive or mesh or conform with the way I like association, and then decrease association with the people that have difficulty in association, as opposed to trying to develop a formal protocol. But maybe in terms of a stream or a public space, you do need a formal protocol. But generally, I'm a take my business elsewhere kind of personality. So you'll see me increase or decrease association with people, as opposed to trying to formally develop like a universal protocol.
yeah, I think that's pretty much fine, because I'm trying to make my protocol sort of universal enough that someone who wasn't really thinking in a protocol sense would still be more or less okay with the protocol, unless they were a troublemaker, right? Like I don't have to remind you not to do ad homs because you're not a troublemaker. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I guess I'm a more systematic, organized person, and people often have a lot of bad social interactions with each other, and I would like to see that diminish. And if people had protocols that they were abiding by, I think it would go a long way, because it would make it a lot easier to say, well, you're misbehaving for this reason, not just I don't like you because whatever, some other stupid ad hom reason.
Yeah, so I guess let me ask if there's anyone in the chat that had anything pressing, because there's a lot of stuff in the chat. I'm not sure if I read it all or people were just talking to each other. So if anyone in the chat had anything they directly want to address to me, I'll try to respond. And then maybe if Jennifer Gandalf, you have closing comments, maybe we'll have to table our formal debate on God to the week in review, and maybe we could try to schedule for next week. I'm not sure if I'm ready to try to schedule that for sometime this week, although it is something that we should probably hopefully do in the near future. And if you reach out to JF to stream with him, I'm looking forward to that. If you want to do like a preparation stream or something, I could probably be available. So if there's no direct questions for me in the chat, there's Moonlight Banjo. If there's one book you'd recommend to me right now, what would it be? So I mean, there's so many different books on different subjects. I have on my channel what I call Duties of the Heart and Path of the Just, or Ethics of the Father. That at the beginning of the stream I went I showed an overview, but if you go to my channel and go to the playlists, in terms of the essential wisdom of what's the meaning of life, how we should live our lives, Duties of the Heart is a book actually written in Arabic by a sage in North Africa, Hebrew sage, saying what's the obligation internally within our heart. And that's probably the single book that's influenced me the most in my life. and I did a whole like 11 streams on it. You could find link to an English translation in that. Path of the Just, which so was written by an Italian rabbi about 400 years ago. That's just kind of a series of methods to self-improve a self, largely through meditation, the path towards righteousness, and it follows like alacrity leads to cleanliness, to humility, and just how do you obtain, what are these virtues, how do you obtain them. And then there's a collection of the Hebrew sages called Ethics of the Father. They're just a collection of the kind of like Confucius says, like single statement pithy wisdom of the sages. So those are my favorite general books on like life from a Judaic perspective. But obviously, if you're not Jewish or not that interested in Judaism, those may not be interesting. Or if you're talking like on consciousness or different subjects, there's so many books. So generally check out my video on speed reading if you want. So I just say start reading whatever interests you, start now. And you can look at my channel, or we could be in private correspondence or comment on my videos, and you'll tell me your field of interest, and maybe I could give better book recommendations specifically related to what you're directly interested in.
Quick question on that very same subject. I sent you in a PM in another format. I have the Gordon Tucker translation of Abraham Joshua Heschel's Heavenly Torah. Scale of 1 to 10, what do you rate that book?
For you, I mean, say like as a non-Jew interested in Judaism, probably like you may be pretty good, like 7, 8. I'm a pretty harsh judge, so so 7 or 8 is pretty high for me. But if you were like a religious Jew, I would give that a lower, probably like a 3 or a 4, because it's more. But generally my rankings are pretty harsh. So I'm saying for someone who's not like initiated into Judaism, not a practicer of Orthodox Judaism, it's a very good book. If you were a practicer of Orthodox Judaism, had a lot of knowledge of Orthodox Judaism, like I wouldn't even recommend it at all.
Oh, okay. What's wrong with it? Because it was on my list of books to read this week that I thought, because I wanted.
But I'm saying it's kind of written for a lay audience.
Okay.
So I was saying, okay, like I went to rabbinic school. I'm a practicing Orthodox Jew. From that perspective, it's a decent book, maybe worth a read. But like go straight into Talmud, or there's better books. So you're saying like as a non-Jew who isn't following the practices of Orthodox Judaism, who doesn't study Talmud regularly, it's probably a very good book.
Well, I'm gonna, just because we're so kind of what I'm working on. A couple books I have in front of me right now. I don't know if any of these would interest you, but 3 that are the first I'm going to look at tomorrow. I got Hunter S. Thompson. This is a lot of his articles from the 1980s. Gonzo Papers, Volume 2. So that's his collection of all of his essays he wrote in the 1980s. I have Anshel Pfeffer, BB. Now, I've read the first 4 or 5 chapters of this book. I got just distracted and didn't quite finish it. But I really want to really understand Israeli politics and the Netanyahu clan quite a bit more. I think most of these alt-writers who hate Jews so much don't really look at nuances. I mean, there's a lot of factions within Judaism and different schools, and I'm aware of some of them myself. Some of them that I like a lot more than others. Others I detest. Some I find interesting. I have my own predilections and nuanced judgments on a number of subjects that fit kind of my own personality. Especially when it comes to these scholarly issues. So the Anshel Pfeffer book looks really good. There aren't any the Netanyahu has not really had good biographies written about him, so this is really kind of exciting. And the other thing is I have The First Soldier, because I got to always keep up with what the Spurgs are talking about via their hero Hitler. It's by Stephen G. Fritz, who wrote a really good book about the military planning on the Eastern Front. So I'm interested if it gives an understanding of Hitler's military strategy. And I'm one of these wargaming nerds. Like a couple years ago, I'd play like Hearts of Iron, and stay up all night, even if I had to work the next morning, because I love those kind of games so much. So I'm always
got to read a lot in terms like sages. So like Jennifer's got her book, The Eternal Truth, Saraswati Dayananda, and you're looking, okay, that so to say, he's from the accepted sages. The book has proven itself of having essential wisdom, well over 100 years later. Versus so like historical records or knowing about politics, you have to read a lot. So like in terms of like politics, World War II, I got all kinds of books, and you have to, and even I'll do more lectures. Like I like the Great Lecture series, and I'll listen to these things in 2 speed. So saying, okay, like if it's like World War II or like Israeli politics, I don't have the time. I have too many things that are more pressing in terms of my interest to read a whole bunch of books on Netanyahu or Israeli politics to get to the truth of it. So I'm more likely to listen to like a lecture series of someone else who's read those books, and for history like that, or if it's a subject like World War II or something, or even maybe some parts of Israeli history or different things that I'll read all types of books. Or if it's a topic that really interests me, like Judaism or spirituality, I'll even read bad books. I'll read anything on the subject just because I love the subject, and even to read a bad book on the subject, could have some sort of benefit. So there's a different kind of wisdom, but in terms of like great books, those are generally like older books that have proven the test of time, and what I call like the venerated sages of generations, and even something like Aristotle and Plato. Like, okay, time is limited, and I haven't really read too much actual Aristotle and Plato. However, I've listened to multiple courses of experts and like the rise and fall of the fall and decline of the Roman Empire. I have
Gibbon.
I have the teaching company's overview of that, like Dante, Thucydides, these famous books, like Time is Too Short. I'm not going to be able to go to through Herodotus or like the Greek classics, but it's enough of an importance that I listen to the teaching company's overview of these books, or even an expert professor teach a course on the book, even though I didn't read it itself. So there's different things. So if you're just you're a non-Jewish American that may never go to Israel, isn't actively involved in Judaism, but you're interested in Netanyahu, I wouldn't have any advice on that, like or Israeli politics. So it's different than something that's more truthful. Even Jennifer was mentioning like quantum consciousness or these different papers of scientific theories. Time is limited, but like I'm going to try to read as much of it as possible. As I said, I'm going to watch through probably the whole Science of Consciousness seminar, at least in 2 speed on YouTube. And from the better presentations, more interesting ideas, I'll maybe read their papers, or maybe buy their books. I might search them on YouTube and watch further lectures from them. So it's something like the Science of Consciousness conference, where I just give everyone a chance, or anyone who was a speaker at the conference. I'm going to listen to all of them in 2 speed on YouTube, and some of those I'll give more time and deference to, and something like World War II or something where it's so divergent and history. And I actually hope to have a series of streams from historians and trying to understand history, to say you have such widely, vastly different interpretations of history, where you have to kind of read as much as you can. And that it goes back to the desire. If you really desire to understand a subject, so looking at my Judaic studies, certain personalities, I'm just so curious about the personality. Even if it's uncredible, I'll read the book on that subject because I so much want to know about that personality, that even though someone uncredible that certainly is bending the truth and largely falsehood, I might even read their book.
Okay, yeah.
And streamings like that, saying like like Luke Ford or something like that, or hosting, like paparazzi for Richard Spencer or something like that. For whatever reason, that's the guy Luke Ford is really interested in. But,
Spencer right now?
Well, I'm just saying Luke Ford, for example, that
Oh.
he would, like anybody that knows anything about Richard Spencer, Luke Ford would probably platform and listen to him, even if they're widely uncredible. So like if, I don't know if I, like my guru or, rabbis that I served, like even if I could talk to the person they got in a fight with and when they were in third grade, as Chris Rock would joke, like, remember the, God forbid, the kid who beat you up when you were in third grade or something like that, that because you're so interested in the subject that, any information that furthers your understanding of the subject, you just want to keep on acquiring more and more, let alone like official, information, someone that was close and trustworthy on the subject, that appears to be giving you better information.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you're going to be watching. I mean, one of the reasons that my reading list looks a little different than yours is I'm working on some slightly different things. I study a little more politics, history, and statecraft. I'm one of these people that knows lots of arcane details, for instance, about lots of historical events. So, like when people want to talk about, say, a controversial topic like World War II, I just get very angry if people are very moralizing about the war. And I don't like the Hitler LARPers. I'm very much against them, but I'm also against America saved the world, Captain America. I don't like historical narratives like that. History is naturally messy, and the human world is a complex world of competing tribes and narratives, and history is a very fascinating way to look at that in action, because just by writing history, you kind of help recreate it in a certain way. And so, I love the subtle interplay of how, say, the study of a certain period has evolved in its own periodicity. So I'm interested in slightly different subjects. Although none of the subjects that you are interested in are things that I haven't read anything about or am uninterested in. I think one of my problems is I'm a bit of a Faustian man. I'd sell my soul to Mephistopheles, the devil, just to figure out everything. I wish I could walk on this planet and know absolutely every damn thing. I mean, that's insane to want that. But there's a part of me that does, and it's not because I want to lord it over other people. It's just
give our.
Oh, Jesus, Lord have mercy.
You'll give your take. Even if you were to live for thousands of years, you couldn't even scratch the surface of the true divine wisdom. And it's like just a true recognition, that's the fact. There is nothing you could do to get around that fact. And then, to live your life intelligently, having recognized the reality is that the unknown will always be the majority, and what you don't know that you don't know, well, is in fact, the majority of the majority.
Donald Rumsfeld knew my great uncle. That was brilliant.
If I could just jump in, because I think you're kind of wrapping up now, Dooovid, with just a couple final thoughts.
Please.
As regards the God debate, I would love to have that. I will take the negative. And I just need maybe a couple days to prepare. So whenever you're ready is good for me. As regards JF, he said he added me on Twitter. He didn't. I don't have. I tend not to be solicitous, and this is not. This is just my own preference, because I think it could potentially be bad for him to have me on his channel. So I'm not going to reach out to him. If someone from his outfit gets in touch with me, I'm happy to go on. But like I said, I'm not solicitous, and I don't want to give the impression that I'm kind of imposing myself on his little niche thing there. And, at the end of the day, it's kind of up to other people to recognize my ideas as being superior. It's not up to me to proselytize. So, yeah. Sorry if people were excited about that. I'm sure it will happen eventually. It's just I don't want to put the guy in a bad position.
Yeah, I just Twittered him your Twitter, and that's probably all I'll do. So, yes, I'm more a Providence kind of person, and accept you have greater forces. The things are meant or not meant to be, and so I'm very unlikely to press things like that. But I Twittered him your Twitter, so he'll if who knows, maybe he was busy, or maybe we'll see. And the advancement of what you're trying to do. Obviously, he's got a big following, and you would probably increase the viewership of your channel and get your ideas out to more people, but it may not be the right venue, and there's cost and benefits of it. I would like to review, as when we do the God argument, I'd like to formally, present the arguments, and I maybe even have visuals. So I need to see when I'm going to have time to do that research, and then stream. And I don't know if we want to do on my channel and your channel, but we could probably do it next week. So let's plan on doing it next week, and we'll table it till now. And on the week in review, we'll try to formally set a date. When we do the week in review, and do it next week, and then hopefully that will be a springboard and create interest for other people that want to do more debates, because generally I said that the majority of the debate is in fact the research. And even though this is something that I've spent hundreds of hours, maybe more, read countless books and lectures on this topic, like I still need to do a little bit more research, and I want to find some visuals or graphics that will be able to formally represent these arguments, so that people are watching. And hopefully we're going to create a venue that will make other people interested in also doing that, and we'll have a series of debates. And obviously, whether God exists or evolution, these type things, they're constantly being debated. And if you're good at it, you'll probably get more invitations, and there'll be more stepping boards for debate. So I think it's more important we do it right. And so let's try to aim to do that next week.
Sounds great. I'm looking forward to it. And
Awesome.
I'm glad that you tweeted JF. I invite other people to get in touch with him.
I didn't tweet him. I privately messaged him your Twitter.
Okay, yeah. So if anyone's interested in seeing me on JF, please get in touch with him. But as I said, I'm not solicitous. Like, got my own thing going, and I don't want to be seen to be pushing people around. So thanks for that, and thanks for the stream, Dooovid. I think it was a great debate, and I look forward to our next week in review, as well as our God debate.
I can't wait. I'm going to be watching some of those consciousness videos while I do my reading tomorrow too, Dooovid. So I'll be kind of, hopefully keeping up with you maybe 30% of the way. And please also, if you're reading books during the day, drop, from goodreads.com or something, the link in my private social media. I would love just to see what you're reading every day. I mean, I'll do the same for you, because we read different stuff. Sometimes we read the same stuff. I'm interested in what you're reading and thinking.
Yeah, maybe we do that through the week in review. I'm generally, I have bookmarks in like 100 different books, and sometimes, I'll have, sometimes I'll pound through a whole book in one day, and then sometimes they'll be on my, shelf, and even sometimes like I'll bookmark it and not come back to it for years. But yeah, that's a little more than usually I do. Like,
okay.
So probably the week in review is more my speed, like a once a week type thing for because at this point I have so much more in front of me than I know I'm going to be capable of doing.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I remember I was in New York, and people are like, well, I'm trying to decrease the amount of friends. I'm not trying to make more friends. I'm trying to decrease the amount of friends I have, or something like that, because recognizing that time is limited. And so books, like, I mean, you could see the books behind me, but like just on my floor here, I have hundreds of books piled on the floor, and my whole desk just has like piles of books. So then like to get in World War II, I have like 50 books on World War II that I've purchased and haven't read yet, and that that I would like to read, but it's just like quantum mind, Judaism, civil engineering, manufacture, science are more pressing than World War II. And even World War II, the majority of books I read about World War II are Holocaust centered. And like, for example, Father Du Bois, I bought his books. I'm looking on my desk, The Holocaust by Bullets and Broad Daylight. I'll probably eventually read those, but it's important. But as of now, who knows? Like, I may never have time to read those books, or different things that generally before I go to sleep, I like to read biographies. So for a few years now, I've been falling asleep to reading biographies. And then, I have certain things that will interest me for a period of time. I have on my desk a whole bunch of stuff about mathematics, like Penrose's book. Um, I'd have to get up to even forget the title, like The Fabric of Reality or whatever it's called. Like that book I bought 15 years ago, and I read a few chapters. And so like I've had a bookmark in Penrose's book for over a decade. And like my father, for example, certain books like he's bought for me, like on gravity and like my connection to my father's father, who was probably similar to Jennifer's father, more like science and secular, but kind of like agnostic, but sciences as religion. Um, so there's so many books on that my father has that I would like to read, and it's just like time is pressing. And but yeah, if we could find a nice correspondence where we're helping each other forward intellectualism and advance forward, but I think the Weekend Review is probably the right venue to do that.
I think one thing I need to commit myself to doing is
Maybe separate. If upon the Weekend Review, maybe if Jennifer's okay with it, maybe the Weekend Review we could have like a book club segment of it, not like KMG where he goes over a book, but like a segment of the Weekend Review where we kind of have like a book club and interesting things that we're reading or thinking about reading or talking about, advising people on what we do, and that might be a nice addition to the Weekend Review.
Actually, I was going to suggest something similar.
I can't read a book in a week. It would take way too much time. But I could maybe do it like once a month if it was short enough.
Right, maybe to add a 15-minute segment to the Weekend Review where we talk about what we're reading or what we're thinking about reading or book reviews. I'm not saying like a book report where we're reporting on a book, but we're just advising each other or telling what we're reading, or different topics where you say, well, if you're interested in that topic, here's a bunch of interesting good books on the topic. We could also have like a book club, like a KMG book club where we all read the same book. But I was just thinking like a Weekend Review where not only talking about streaming, but we could add a segment to, what books did you read this book? What books do you plan on reading next week?
Yeah, I really would appreciate that. I mean, I would probably try and send you, several hours, maybe even 24 hours before, a quick tickler file of like what I've read and a couple points I'd talk about ahead of time. And maybe I would, be able to find an ebook copy of what you read maybe ahead of time, just so I could take a look at it too. I mean, I like people I can share books with. That's really important to me. I mean, and I am starved for that because so few people read really the kind of stuff I read, or just even read, period. I mean, I like other readers, even if they're in other fields, because I constantly kind of want to know, okay, what does a really smart person who looks at a lot of stuff in a certain field read, so that when I get around to maybe whatever it's, you do with Judaism or consciousness, because I'll get around to some of that stuff and, okay, well, Dooovid likes this book, he's read it, I'll give it a look. I mean, I want to know that for my own edification. And, maybe if you're interested in Richard Nixon or something, I can give you, a preview of those books someday. I don't know, but that's the point, just because, I respect your opinion. And
yeah, something like Richard Nixon, that's something I never thought about. I don't have any books on him. Like there's been general U.S. history and stuff I listen to. My father, has more resources, so he probably buys like the major books, and he might have skimmed through, and he's already older, and came to remembers Nixon or values generic knowledge of U.S. history more. So if the Weekend Review on Church of Entropy is not the right venue, so let's table that for now. We'll try to do it with the Weekend Review this week. And if Jennifer's, not so much into the book club type thing, maybe I'll try to create something like that on my channel for like a weekly, a book club type thing.
Well, are you seeing it more as we have a subject and then we have like maybe 5 or so books that we recommend in relation to that subject? Is that
I'm thinking more like Weekend Review, like where we're saying, these are the streams I appeared on. This is kind of what happened. These are the streams I'm thinking of appearing on next week. And, you know, even if you didn't have a chance, if you had a chance to watch them, you might give comments, or you might just, oh, good job, I'm glad to hear. And, you know, so the books would be kind of like, this is what I'm currently reading. These are the books I bought and plan on reading. And if there's back and forth where it's interesting, where people have read the same books or interested to hear a little bit about it, or if not, you know, just like, it'd just be like a report where Dooovid or Gandalf would be, you know, Gandalf would be like, oh, I just got these 2 or 3 books on Richard Nixon, and maybe me or you would just be like, you know, blank stare, and there would be no comment, and that would be it. Or you know, like, I could tell you about all the books I'm reading on Judaism or something, and you just say like, well, you know, like, whatever, I'm not Jewish, I don't have time to, you know, really think about that. So it's just like, okay, I'm glad you're finding books on Judaism, they're interesting to you. But, you know, it's not going to be so interesting to have like a book report, or it's unlikely that, you know, you or Gandalf, I'm going to expect you to even have the interest to look at those books.
Yeah, I'm not much into books. I tend to read based on recommendations from people who justify that I need to read the book to further my own knowledge, but I'm kind of in the teaching phase rather than the learning phase right now. However, it might be profitable to have some type of book presentation on the stream. So let's keep the door open to that and maybe develop our idea of exactly how we want it to go, and we can fit that into the week in review going forward.
Yeah, and I put back like what I said about the sages. So like, you might think that time is limited, and therefore like you can't help out people that are in need, you can't answer simple questions, or so on and so on. But when you look at the lives of the sages, you see that that's generally not how the sages carried themselves, and somehow they always had time to try to help out people in need and answer simple questions. So I think in terms of the sages also, you would find that even the greatest teachers probably spent significant amounts of time, or even majority of their time, in research. That, you know, so even if you're at the state of, you know, where you're know enough to teach and lead, the fact is that knowledge is deep and impenetrable, and research is a constant thing, and constant study is just a fact of life. You know, no matter how great that you've became. And as I said, if you look at the lives of the greatest sages, you even though they've written series of books, they also spent significant portions of their time regularly studying. And that was a continual thing that they did, you know, relatively till the day they died. You know, it's not like, you know, someone like Penrose or Hamarov, or, you know, even, you know, gurus, religious leaders, not like, okay, like, I've graduated, I've learned this stuff. That, you know, if you examine, you know, said for years now, I've been going to sleep reading biographies. And he's like, no, those people were in constant study till the day of their death.
Yeah, that's the way I want to be. I want to read until my brain no longer functions, and then I'd rather, if my brain can't function, I'd rather just die. If I can't remember anything, can't read anything, and I'm just, you know, living in adult diapers, give me the heroin, please. Give me the morphine. That's the way I am.
And a recognition of, you know, what truth is, and no matter how much we've accomplished, the great distance of how far we are away from truth. To say, like, even if you merited to live 120 years and, you know, publish countless books and be recognized as a world-renowned expert on countless topics, that even with that, from a truthful aspect of what is truth and how far are you away from that, that yes, the majority of your time till death would be spent in the research phase, that there's no such thing as I'm done with my research. And I'm saying that that's based off of my knowledge of the life of the sages, and saying from my knowledge, basically all the sages, their whole life was the research phase. They never finished it.
I see. Yeah. So anyway, I appreciate everything, Dooovid. I mean, I don't think I have anything more to say. I appreciate you getting me into the science of consciousness stuff. Hopefully a lot of that stuff will be live this week. I'm going to look through some of the old stuff probably here as I get ready for bed myself. So, yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks, Church of Entropy. Thanks, Dooovid.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. It's you know, it's only Monday, so you it's possible there'll be more streams, or if you make a stream, Jennifer, and I see you're doing it.
Yeah, and
I might
anything I
join.
can do to help you if you need scientific articles.
Otherwise, we'll hopefully we'll do the week review again next.
I'm having trouble.
And any new viewers who
Yeah, excellent. And please let me know anything.
you're fading out here again.
Dooovid,
Yeah,
is it you or is
it's
it
probably you. It's probably you. I don't know if you had connection issues. I think.
Okay, then I'll leave. But yeah, always send me a private message if you need a scientific article. I'm here to serve and find if you need it.
Great.
All right, thank you, Dooovid.
Okay, you have anything final to say, Jennifer? And then I might give a tiny monologue at the end of the show.
Sure. I'm thinking it might be profitable for me to write another article about stream protocol, and not to enforce it super strictly, but more just to give people an idea of what our philosophy is, and sort of create an environment where people feel like encouraged to come on and talk about their ideas rather than intimidated. So I might put that article out sometime soon. I've got a couple other ones I'm working on. So churchofentropy.wordpress.com. Thanks again, Dooovid, for having me on. Great show on JFs today. Looking forward to the next one. And thanks for hosting the stream. We'll talk to you later. I'll just hop off now and you can do your monologue, okay?
Okay, great.
Talk to you soon.
Okay, so if there's any new viewers that are watching that hadn't seen me before, I still get 19 people, or people that watch this in the future. I have my personal situation that might be freeing up more time. I might be doing more streaming. I might be reaching out to new people to request conversations with them, that people who I watch their streams or have heard about, that might try to reach out to them and speak with them and have conversations on my channel. And also consciousness, as the consciousness conference closes up and I go through the videos and read through some of the stuff, I might do more streams continuing my study of consciousness and the different theories. And I have another Ask the Rabbi coming up on conversion. I've already spent tens of hours researching and have a lot of material, and it's probably going to be a long, like 5-hour stream of me reading lots of stuff, because it's a very complicated issue and there's a lot of information I want to pack in there. And there's a whole bunch of stuff I'd like to do, and in all whole different aspects. It's Rathayatha, the Hare Krishna. I put my Lord Jagannath deities, I moved them from where I usually keep them to have them in the background for the stream. And so it's Rathayatha season, and there's actually a whole bunch now in Metro Detroit, Lansing, Novi, Troy, maybe local temples. And so I might be streaming that, maybe some more chess. Anyone who has basic questions or just wants to be in contact with me, you could DM me on Twitter. You could join my Discord. Check my Twitter for my Discord. If you want to privately talk to me, I could. Unfortunately, due to trolling, I don't use my real name. Generally, I'll give you that if you want to find me and add me on Facebook. And I'm not much for small talk, so. I do like being a good person and helping people, and I like ideas, and I'm willing to learn from everybody and give people a chance, or if you want to talk about something, so feel free to reach out. I appreciate people tuning in. I appreciate people being active in the chat. Sometimes it's hard to stream and listen to the chat, so I'll try to rewatch this and read through the chat. And a lot of people, like I see Oliver, Heinrich, it's Michael, Mike. Some people I haven't seen for a while, like Oliver has been active in my streams for a while, so I appreciate you being here tonight. And I'm going to go through JF of the chat and try to read the comments and be active in there. And people comment, I try to reply. And I've talked about what I want to get out of streaming, and it's basically to create an intellectual community to forward ideas. I'm not really trying to make friends or something like that, because as I discussed, I'm kind of like introverted, and generally like to spend my time alone in reading. Although I would like to find the right woman to marry and spend the rest of my life with and build a family. So, but I'm more based on providence and pray to God that somehow that will come to fruition. In terms of forwarding these ideas, I have a lot of different areas of interest that I'm constantly reading and researching on. So if you're also, researching these things, start by being active in my chat comments. And if you want to reach out and you tried to reach out, I say DM me on Twitter or join my Discord, and we could have direct conversation. And God bless everyone. I appreciate you supporting my channel, and I thought tonight was a pretty friendly, good show, and hopefully it'll lead to more streaming, and I'll have time to combine my research with more conversations. And so have a great night. Blessings to everybody. And so I guess that's it. Okay. God bless. Have a great night, everybody. I don't have a next stream plan besides my week in review of Church of Entropy Sunday. So, we'll see what's going to happen in the future. You can find me on Twitter. And if you want to keep posted of what I'm active in.